Hello, and welcome back to the Electronic Intifada's live stream for Thursday, August 20th. We're honored to return after 2 weeks. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Nora Barrows-Friedman, here with my colleagues Ali Abunimah, Jon Elmer, and Tamara Nassar. It's day 1049 of Israel's genocide in Gaza. Coming up, we'll be joined by reporter Abubaker Abed to discuss developments in Gaza and Ireland's rejection of dozens of student visa applications from Palestinians in Gaza who had already received admission and full scholarships to Irish universities. Some say this is an effort to appease the far right. And Asa Winstanley remarks on a landmark legal victory. A top UK employment tribunal has enshrined new protections for anti-Zionists. Later on in the show, Jon will report on the loss of more than 1/3 of the US military's MQ-9 Reaper drone fleet in Iran and Yemen, plus the latest on the Strait of Hormuz, and he'll have an analysis of newly released Hezbollah operations footage from the days leading up to the June ceasefire. But first, let's take a look at the news. Here's a brief summary of some of the latest developments this week in Palestine and Lebanon. In Gaza, Israel has continued to massacre children, women, and men against a looming water shortage due to Israel's ongoing blockade of fuel, infrastructure materials, and spare parts, pushing municipal services toward collapse. On Wednesday, Israel carried out the latest serial murder of Palestinian civil police and security personnel. At least 9 were killed and many more were wounded in a missile strike on the police headquarters in a park in Gaza City, amid the tents of thousands of forcibly displaced people as Israel's military expands the extermination zone inside Gaza. Journalist Ayman al-Hessi reported from the scene. Gaza's Interior Ministry condemned the massacre, saying, quote, "International silence regarding the continuous targeting of the police force in Gaza, combined with the lack of effective action by mediators, has emboldened the occupation to commit further massacres against the police force." The ministry added that all claims made by the Israeli perpetrators to justify its crimes, including assertions that the army was targeting resistance leaders, quote, "are baseless, and the occupation is working to dismantle the police force in order to spread chaos within Palestinian society." The Interior Ministry listed the names of the murdered police personnel. Brigadier General and Acting Director of the Gaza Governorate Police, Ayman Mahmoud Jundia, Colonel Osama Hashim al-Hajin, the Director of the Gaza Governorate's Women's Police Department, Colonel Fatina Abdul Jabbar al-Sahar, Colonel Ibrahim Abdul Rahman Tamraz, Colonel Ala al-Alyan, Lieutenant Colonel Hazem Jabir Khalaf, Major Othman Shahata Abu Sam'an, and Lieutenant Samahar Misbah Hamada. Reporter Fayez Kureka filmed people, including children, who were injured in the attack being carried by passersby, some of them with serious wounds. Bodies of those killed were also being attended to, including one person who was decapitated in the attack. Those images have been blurred. A child, 13-year-old Danya Haitham al-Jamasi, was also murdered in the Israeli missile strike. Writer Mossab Abu Toha 2021 video of Danya from her school's website, singing an alphabet song in her 3rd grade class. Danya was killed on Wednesday. The Hamas political party called Israel's strike, quote, "a new Zionist war crime, which reveals the determination of the government led by war criminal Benjamin Netanyahu to evade its obligations and its practical refusal to proceed with implementing the ceasefire agreement and completing its subsequent stages." Hamas pointed out that the timing of the massacre, coming on the heels of recent meetings with mediators and the so-called guarantors of the fraudulent ceasefire, as well as meetings with Board of Peace member and Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, confirms that the Israeli regime is deliberately undermining any next steps in the agreement. Hamas added that Israel is dangerously pushing to reignite the war of extermination against the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip, rather than adhering to what was agreed upon, according to the Arabic language Palestinian outlet Al-Ray. The Gaza Park massacre came a day after Israel killed 7 Palestinians, including a child, and injured 14 in a missile strike on the Gaza port, targeting people trying to find relief from the summer heat at a cafe inside a crowded shelter area full of forcibly displaced families. Al Jazeera reporter Hani Mahmoud said, quote, "Among those killed is one child. A 7th body is also at Al-Shifa Hospital, and according to civil defense sources, it's unrecognizable. They haven't been able to identify the body because it looked like the missile hit him directly and left the body shredded." Journalist Mohammed Abu Salama filmed people expressing anger and grief in the aftermath of the attack. Al-Arabi journalist and contributor to the Electronic Intifada, Asim al-Nabih, reported from Al-Shifa Hospital as mourners grieved over the bodies of their loved ones just an hour after the attack. Asim says, quote, "Their families are bidding them farewell for the last time during what is supposed to be a ceasefire. 2 missiles targeted a crowded area with hundreds of families in one of the most crowded areas in the Gaza Strip. 2 missiles killed 6 and injured a large number of people and civilians and residents in the area. During a time when there have been many statements and announcements about inching toward an agreement for Gaza, the Israeli response is not only rejection, but on the ground, it is responding with more airstrikes, targeting and killing Palestinians inside the Gaza Strip." Project Muhammad, a mutual aid organization in Gaza, was distributing bread to displaced families in the port area when Israel attacked. The project posted a video of its aid workers driving several severely wounded people in the car, a video that I won't show here. Quote, "What began as a bread distribution turned into an emergency rescue," they said. Project Muhammad's team is now evacuating the injured and helping them receive medical care. "We went out to feed the hungry and found ourselves carrying the wounded." Reporter Mahmoud Shalha filmed a child mourning over the body of his father, wrapped in a white shroud, in the aftermath of the massacre. It has been 313 days since the so-called ceasefire was declared, during which at least 1,273 Palestinians have been killed. The United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, reported earlier this month that an average of 1 child a day has been killed in Israeli attacks, quote, "despite an agreement for the suspension of military operations and the full entry of humanitarian aid and relief 10 months ago. The agency's regional director, Edouard Begbetter, said that, quote, "a ceasefire that leaves an average of 1 child dead each and every day is failing children, with hundreds more children injured, many severely. Children in Gaza are still waiting for the end to the violence they were promised." Families are now crowded into roughly a third of the Gaza Strip, sheltering in unsafe conditions among destroyed buildings, rubble, and accumulated solid waste, he added. The Gaza municipality warned this week that Palestinians are facing a severe water shortage as Israel's ongoing blockade of fuel, infrastructure materials, and spare parts is pushing municipal services toward collapse. For the 5th consecutive month, Israel has prohibited the entry of fuel, according to the municipality's deputy head, Ala Adin Al-Bata, leading to the paralysis of vital services. The lack of diesel for generators, combined with the total destruction of the electricity network, has left most wells out of service. Al-Bata warned that sewage could soon overflow into streets and displacement shelters, accelerating disease outbreaks, to which the health system, deliberately collapsed by Israel, lacks the capacity to respond. Fuel scarcity has also stopped the ability to clear streets, remove debris, and take away solid waste. Approximately 10 million tons of rubble have accumulated along roads, blocking access and complicating any emergency response. In related news, civil defense crews have spent more than 40 continuous days pulling bodies from the rubble across Gaza. Civil defense spokesperson Mahmoud Basal reported this week that so far, rescue workers have pulled the remains of 170 Palestinians from 17 different buildings in the current phase of the prolonged operation, carried out in coordination with the International Committee of the Red Cross. He says that dozens more remain unaccounted for in the same sites, and teams are moving from one destroyed house to the next, with what he describes as almost no equipment because of Israel's deliberate attacks on rescue vehicles, plus its ongoing prevention of materials, fuel, and spare parts. Basal adds that because of the limited resources, his crews are unable to reach most of the homes that still have bodies buried within or beneath them. Meanwhile, on the eastern side of the so-called Yellow Line, where Israel continues to expand its extermination zone across 70% of Gaza, Israeli forces and Israeli civilian contractors are, quote, conducting a wide and organized operation to process and clear the rubble from neighborhoods and facilities they have destroyed in the Gaza Strip and relocate it from areas under their military control to outside the Strip, according to a new investigation by Euromed Human Rights Monitor. The group says this operation is happening, quote, without any official record of the quantities removed or independent oversight, and before international and local investigative committees have had the chance to survey, examine, and document the sites. This risks destroying crucial evidence of genocide and the remains of victims still unaccounted for under the rubble. Euromed says that according to its initial field reports, approximately 400 heavy pieces of excavation, demolition, crushing, and transport machinery operated by Israeli civilian companies under military protection are active across eastern and southern Gaza. Quote, they demolish remaining structures, crush rubble from destroyed neighborhoods, and load the debris onto trucks for transportation away from the original sites. In recent weeks, Euromed Monitor tracked nearly 100 Israeli trucks daily, leaving the Gaza Strip with debris. These trucks carry rubble to undisclosed sites within Israel and further south of the occupied West Bank. The systematic removal of rubble at this pace, Euromed adds, conceals the evidence of appalling crimes Israel committed in Gaza, especially those related to genocide, such as summary executions and killing unarmed civilians. These sites need careful examination and thorough criminal investigation before any intervention that might change or erase their features. We'll have more on Israel's systematic erasure of war crimes evidence, which is itself a war crime, later on in the coming weeks. It has been 600 days since Dr. Hussam Abu Safia, a pediatrician and the director of the Kamal Adwan Hospital in Beit Lahia, was abducted by Israeli forces in December 2024. He has remained in Israeli administrative detention ever since, without charge or trial, and recently in solitary confinement. He has endured physical and psychological torture and abuse ever since his abduction and detention. In July, as we reported, Dr. Abu Safia was beaten by Israeli prison guards who used hammers and batons, and his lawyers said that he was being subjected to daily beatings, resulting in several instances of loss of consciousness, but without receiving appropriate medical treatment. According to a report in DropSite earlier this month, Dr. Hussam Abu Safia suffered multiple injuries, including fractured ribs, after enduring severe beatings by Israeli prison authorities on July 27th. The Palestinian prisoner's media office described it as the most difficult day of his imprisonment since being detained without charge. Dropsite noted that, quote, the apparent repercussions against Abu Safia in prison following the legal challenge to his detention and similar cases involving detained medical workers have sent a chilling message to the families of Palestinian detainees, particularly doctors, that seeking justice, either through legal means or public campaigns, can have severe consequences. As previously mentioned, Trump's envoy to the so-called Board of Peace, his son-in-law Jared Kushner, arrived in Israel to meet with war crimes fugitive Benjamin Netanyahu. Kushner said on Fox News that he told Netanyahu the U.S. would not restrict any attacks on Gaza by Israel as long as there are, quote, imminent threats, a vague and deliberate phrasing allowing Israel to continue the genocide. This was just hours before Israel carried out the massacre on the Gaza seaport on Tuesday. Both Kushner and Netanyahu agreed that the Board of Peace would establish working groups focused on the, quote, disarmament and demilitarization of Gaza before any reconstruction happens, which was not a part of the initial agreement Hamas and the armed resistance factions entered into in October 2025. However, earlier this month, the Board of Peace did issue its first construction contract, not for housing for Palestinians, nor hospitals, nor schools, but for an outpost for a small battalion of Moroccan armed forces, which would rotate from a base in Israel, according to the Guardian newspaper. It would be part of a planned so-called international stabilization force, which would be mandated to surveil, control, and attack Palestinians, but not protect them against the Israeli military, which continues to carry out the genocide. The contract, which the Guardian said had not yet been finalized, was awarded to 𝐓𝐡𝐞 International, a Louisiana-based firm that has previously carried out work with the U.S. government in countries such as Iraq. 𝐓𝐡𝐞 International previously worked as a subcontractor for the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation and registered as a foreign corporation in Israel a week before the GHF began operations in May 2025. GHF was an aid scheme that lured starving people into confined, militarized areas where Israeli soldiers and American contractors shot and killed at least 2,500 Palestinians and injured more than 17,000 over a period of 5 months. Not one Israeli or American soldier, contractor, or politician has yet been held accountable for the slaughters at GHF killing field sites. Turning to the occupied West Bank, where Israeli forces and armed settlers have continued to besiege Palestinian villages and carry out pogroms and forced expulsion operations. Israelis have continued to attack the northern village of Qusra for at least 11 days, where settlers and soldiers have laid siege to 3 homes, obstructing the delivery of food, water, and basic supplies. Qusra Mayor Abdul Azim Al-Wadi told the Anadolu news agency on Wednesday that the settlers continued to deploy around the homes alongside Israeli army forces, while the area has been declared a closed military zone. Wadi stressed that the 3 families are facing difficult conditions due to the continued siege and restrictions on their movement. He also said the Israeli army continued to control one of the 3 homes and use it as a military barracks, while settlers remained around the besieged homes. The area has seen repeated attacks by Israeli occupiers in recent months to establish an illegal settlement outpost and seize Palestinian land and homes, Anadolu added. A Palestinian American owner of one of the besieged homes, Lu'ai Abu Rida, arrived from the United States to protect his family's property from an Israeli settler takeover.
Well, it's been a nightmare for the last 2 weeks. And it's even more terrifying when I landed and I watched a video that the settlers with the ATVs were still able to come around my house. And what's more terrifying, that they were shaking hands with the soldiers that they're supposed to come to protect us and remove the settlers. And this is the second week. My brother and his son, and now I'm going to be under siege, feeling for my own safety and my brother and son's safety. And I'm still demanding from the U.S. Embassy and the U.S. officials to provide us protection.
In the Jenin area village of 𝐓𝐿𝐞 on Monday, Israeli soldiers raided approximately 100 homes and buildings and detained dozens of Palestinians, several of whom were physically assaulted. Some were marked by the Israeli soldiers with numbers on their faces and arms. According to local reports, the soldiers threatened Palestinians from resisting settler violence, saying that they would bulldoze the entire village if settlers are confronted. The raid and detentions in 𝐓𝐿𝐞 are part of a sweeping and escalating governmental plan to reestablish at least 4 Jewish settlement colonies in the area, which were evacuated in 2005, the Tel Aviv newspaper Haaretz reports. In Burin, a village south of Nablus on Tuesday, Israeli settlers installed dirt barriers on a road leading to a home while groups of settlers gathered along the road. According to the Palestinian human rights group 𝐓𝐡𝐞, quote, the Sufan family's home near the Yitzhar settlement has faced repeated settler attacks before, including settlers throwing stones and paint cans at the house, attempts to break in, and attacks on its electricity supply. The electricity has now been cut for the second time, while attacks on their home continue. On August 18th, settlers blocked the road connecting the home to Burin with dirt barriers, effectively isolating the family from the village. 𝐓𝐿𝐞 adds, quote, this is part of an alarming pattern documented in several communities in the West Bank, where repeated attacks are becoming a gradual siege, isolating families in their homes from their community and essential services to ultimately push families to leave. In the Jordan Valley, 47 Palestinian families are facing imminent expulsion after Israeli soldiers and settlers cut their water supply there as well. The human rights group B'Tselem says that more than 300 people, nearly half of them children, are facing expulsion in Ras Al Ahmar, Ta'ala, and Sharq Atuf after the water pipes were severed. Israeli forces are reportedly preventing the transfer of water to the area where Palestinians rely on agriculture and livestock for their livelihoods. Israel is working on creating a separation barrier in the northern Jordan Valley called the Crimson Thread, which extends about 22 kilometers. The United Nations Human Rights Office said that after Israel announced the plan for the so-called Crimson Thread separation barrier, settler violence against the Palestinian communities of the northern Jordan Valley have intensified, including sexual harassment and assault, arson attacks, livestock theft, and assaults on children. Indigenous Palestinians in occupied historic Palestine, known as present-day Israel, are also facing accelerating land theft by the Israeli government and its militarized state apparatus. In the city of Lid, southeast of Tel Aviv, more than 70 families in the Al-Mahata neighborhood are facing the threat of eviction and home demolition after receiving orders from Israeli authorities, some allowing as little as 1 week, citing the pretext of seizing state land, according to the Arab 48 news site. These photos are credited to Arab 48. Quote, residents emphasize that their families have lived in the neighborhood since before the establishment of Israel. They refuse to leave homes that hold nearly a century of memories, warning that these orders pave the way for displacing the population and seizing the neighborhood's land for the benefit of settler groups, the publication reports. A neighborhood resident who asked to remain anonymous for fear of reprisal told Arab 48 that what the Al-Mahata neighborhood is witnessing amounts to, in his view, ethnic cleansing by Israeli authorities. He added that the neighborhood has suffered from a systematic policy of neglect since the establishment of the state, despite being located in the central region and within one of the country's largest cities. On Monday, in the village of Rahat in the Naqab Desert, Israel demolished 2 homes belonging to the Abubaker family. Arab 48 reported that the demolition in Rahat comes at a time when the Naqab region is witnessing an escalation in house demolitions, including in recognized Palestinian towns and so-called unrecognized villages, amid a severe housing crisis and a shortage of building permits that would allow Palestinian residents to expand their towns and build new homes. Demolitions have escalated significantly in recent years, affecting dozens of homes and structures in Rahat and other towns and villages in the Naqab. And on August 15th, in the city of al-Fahim in the north, Israeli police stormed a pre-wedding celebration for a young groom, Mahmoud Mustafa Afan Mohammed, throwing stun grenades among the celebrants and ordering them to lie face down on the ground, according to Arab 48. Eyewitnesses said the police carried out the raid while the celebration was taking place during a festive atmosphere on the eve of the wedding. A video of the raid circulated on social media, showing dozens of guests being forced by Israeli police to lay face down on the ground amid overturned chairs. In Lebanon, the Ministry of Health says that since the escalation of attacks in early March, nearly 4,400 people have been killed, including at least 257 children, and at least 12,300 people have been injured as of this week. For more on the situation on the ground in Lebanon, our contributor Roqayah Chamseddine filed this report for the Electronic Intifada on Wednesday evening.
This is Roqayah Chamseddine reporting for the Electronic Intifada from southern Lebanon, where Israeli forces have maintained a relentless and escalating wave of attacks. Overnight and into the morning hours, the assaults expanded dramatically, marked by heavy airstrikes, artillery shelling, and targeted ground incursions. Among the most harrowing developments is a devastating massacre in the southern town of Ansar on Saturday, August 15th, where an overnight Israeli airstrike destroyed a home as the family slept inside, killing parents Ali Samir Haj Hassan, Zainab Mahdi Nasruddin, and their 4 children, Zahra, Hassan, Hussein, and Abbas. The impact was so catastrophic that rescuers found body parts of the children floating in a children's pool at a local resort within the village. This tragedy unfolded alongside widespread bombardments across the south. Airstrikes heavily targeted the area between Al-Qantara and Dir Sariyan, while continuous artillery shelling hammered Al Tahir and Kfar Rumman. Explosions were also reported across Barashit and Bayut al-Sayyad. As the morning progressed, the Israeli assaults intensified, with Israeli forces deliberately razing homes in the village of Bani Hayyan and carrying out another explosion in the open areas of Al-Mansouri, accompanied by heavy machine gun firing toward the town. Similar machine gun fire and artillery targeted Mesa Jaban and the outskirts of Shama. Furthermore, hostile Israeli troop movements were monitored pushing inland towards Zautar, where forces positioned an earthen berm near the town square, alongside artillery shelling that targeted a residential home and intentionally set a fire at the location. As these relentless bombardments continue unchecked, local sources in the south report a deafening silence and a total lack of intervention from the Lebanese government, leaving families to face the Israeli onslaught alone. Residents have expressed to me a profound sense of abandonment, feeling entirely forgotten and betrayed by a state that has failed to protect them or secure the survival of their towns and villages.
That was Roqayah Chamseddine reporting for the Electronic Intifada from Lebanon on Wednesday. We've published many features in the last week, but today we're highlighting excerpts from Crushed but Defiant, The Grape Growers of Gaza by Amro, Rashad Abu Aisha, and Nour Abu Aisha, writing from Gaza. When asked, Mohammed Shah Malach, a farmer from Sheikh Ajlin, a neighborhood in southern Gaza City, can rattle off with ease all the popular Palestinian sayings about figs and grapes. When your grapes and figs are ripe, he said, everyone wants to be your friend. And famously, in the month of August, harvest your grapes without fear. Mohammed does not know the exact year when his family's vineyards in 𝐓𝐡𝐞 were first planted. Yet he cannot remember a time in his life when there were no vineyards, except, that is, until these past few years, when Israel destroyed the majority of the family's vineyards and orchards, which were spread over 100 acres of land. Even my father doesn't remember a time before the vineyard, and he is 80 years old, he says. He estimates that the vines that Israel destroyed were over 100 years old, definitely over 100. Mohammed is lean and has short gray and black hair and pronounced cheekbones. In addition to being a farmer, he is an engineer and a math teacher. He meets with the Electronic Intifada at a school in Gaza City. Before October 2023, 𝐓𝐡𝐞 was a popular tourist destination in Gaza. Farmers would line the roads with their stalls to sell grapes and figs. On Fridays, families, including our own, would travel south on Al-Rashid Street along Gaza's coast and visit the stalls. You would approach a stall and a vendor would tell you, just taste the grapes, and if you don't like it, it's on me. 𝐓𝐡𝐞 had the sea to its west, and then cafes, chalets, and vineyards and farmland to the east. It felt very far removed from the city. But Israel destroyed many of the structures and farms of 𝐓𝐡𝐞. Some farmers reported that their vineyards had been bulldozed, and the area is nearly unrecognizable from what it once was. Israel even continues to attack the area after the so-called ceasefire. On August 13th, an Israeli strike targeted a vehicle traveling through 𝐓𝐡𝐞, killing a police commander and injuring several others. We used to depend on ourselves and our source of livelihood that we built with our own hands, and today we live on aid, he said. Now there is nothing left. The area has been taken over by crows and stray dogs. Only 3% of cropland in Gaza, according to the UN's Food and Agriculture Organization, is accessible and undamaged as of June 2026. This means that the majority of Gaza's farms have been destroyed by Israeli attacks or rendered inaccessible due to the Israeli military occupation and its expanding yellow line. Despite the immensity of these challenges, the cultural and agricultural heritage of Gaza's grapes is being kept alive by the farmers who have returned to the land and who are attempting to replant grape varieties such as Dabuki and Jarishi and Halwani. Dabuki is known for its golden color and Halwani for its sweetness. The Jarishi grape is special because it makes a sound when you eat it. In June and July every year, Mohammed Shamalach said that they would carefully cut and remove the leaves surrounding the grapes to allow sunlight to get through. This is what gives some grapes their golden color and allows them to ripen perfectly. Mohammed said that at harvest would begin at midnight with a crew of 7 young men from the family. They would gather at 1 or 2 a.m. using flashlights to pick the grapes covered in dew. From there, the grapes would go to the various vendors along the coastal road or to trucks that would ship them up north. The Shamalach family, unlike so many of Gaza's farmers, are fortunate that their land has not been swallowed by the yellow line, which demarcates areas from which the Israeli occupation forbids Palestinians from accessing. Still, there are risks in returning to the land and replanting, especially with the possibility of unexploded ordnance. 𝐓𝐡𝐞 is no longer the agricultural or tourist hub it once was. Missing are not only the cafes and shops, but also most of the roads, water pumps, farming supplies, and access to any reliable source of electricity, according to Mohammed. As long as there are human beings in 𝐓𝐡𝐞, life must return, he said. 𝐓𝐡𝐞 sacrificed its sons, its land, its trees, its infrastructure, and its buildings. Yet, Mohammed said, provide us with only water and electricity, and I swear to God, in 3 years we will return 𝐓𝐡𝐞's grapes and figs to the way they were before, and better. Already Mohammed's words are proving true. Farmer Talat Suleiman Shamalach, 52, was able to plant grape seedlings last year. They miraculously bore fruit. Those are excerpts from Crushed but Defiant, The Grape Growers of Gaza by Amro, Rashad Abu Aisha, and Nour Abu Aisha. Nour is a journalist and Amro is a student of English and a writer, and both are based in Gaza. Read more on electronicintifada.net. And finally, as we always do, we wanted to highlight people expressing joy, determination, and reclamation across Palestine and around the world. In Gaza this week, the writing project We Are Not Numbers, through which we have met and worked with many young writers, posted this video saying, quote, "Good morning from Gaza, where children still find ways to learn, sing, and dream, even when their schools have been reduced to rubble." This young girl is a student at the Samir Project's Hassan School, where Palestinian children continue to learn, sing, and hold on to pieces of childhood, even as much of the education system around them has been destroyed. Across Gaza, children are attending classes in tents, temporary learning spaces, and makeshift schools because the schools they once knew have been damaged or destroyed. Yousef reported in 2026 that more than 90% of schools in Gaza have been damaged or destroyed, while hundreds of thousands of children remain without access to face-to-face learning. And still, they learn, they sing, they carry their culture forward, We Are Not Numbers says. This young singer presents Sabah al-Khair Ya Yasmin, a Palestinian folk song passed down through generations, now carried by a new one.
صباح الورد والياسمين الشمس تنور الغرفة صحيت من النوم على صوت عصافير بكتابة وقهوة في الشرفة تسعد صباح الشغالين بضحكة وقلبي مليانين نعناع وليمون من عمي شفيع صباحك وردي يا حلوة يا صباح الورد والياسمين الشمس تنور الغرفة صحيت من النوم على صوت عصافير بكتابة وقهوة في الشرفة تسعد صباح الشغالين بضحكة وقلبي مليانين نعناع وليمون من عمي ياسين صباحي وردي يا حلوة.
And that's it for the news roundup. As always, go to electronicintifada.net for much more, especially to read our new features by our brave writers in Gaza. You're watching the Electronic Intifada live stream. I'm Nora Barrows-Friedman here with my colleague Ali Abanima. Hi, Ali.
Hi, Nora. It's good to see you. It's good to see everyone in the chat. Thank you so much for being here. We certainly missed you. And as you can see, a lot has happened that we've not covered on the live stream. So thank you for that extraordinarily detailed report, Nora. And we have a lot more coming.
We do. We have a packed show. We have a guest that I know everyone's been clamoring to see. So yeah, let's get into it. Let's go.
Let's do that. Yeah. Let's go right to that.
Yes.
And all right. So let's move on. So just a reminder, you're watching and listening to the Electronic Intifada live stream. I'm Ali Abanima here with my colleague Nora Barrows-Friedman. On August 5th, the Electronic Intifada published a report by Abubaker Abed revealing that Ireland has rejected student visa applications from at least 20 Palestinians in Gaza. The students had secured fully funded scholarships at Irish universities after struggling to complete applications and examinations amid Israel's genocide. Yet Irish immigration authorities rejected them for reasons including insufficient financial documentation, gaps in their education or employment, and failure to prove strong enough obligations to return home. Reporting for the Electronic Intifada, Abubaker has since learned that at least 20 more applications from Gaza have been rejected, while students from both Gaza and the occupied West Bank have received refusals. For the first time in a decade, Ireland has reportedly rejected more Palestinian visa applications than it has granted. The refusal rate has risen from 9% last year to more than 50% this year. This is happening despite Ireland's reputation as one of the European Union countries most sympathetic to the Palestinian cause. Abubaker Abed, as many of you, of course, know, is a journalist from Deir al-Balah refugee camp in Gaza. He was himself evacuated from Gaza to Ireland as a student in April 2025. And we're Delighted to welcome him back to the Electronic Intifada live stream.
Hi, Abubaker.
Hi, Abubaker. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can, and we can see you. It's great to see you. And we've got lots to talk about with you today. So let's get straight into it. Let's begin with the scale of what's happening. When did this wave of visa rejections begin? How many students are now affected, according to your latest reporting, and how many are still waiting for decisions? Just give us an overall picture of who these students are, which universities have accepted them, and what has changed since the previous groups of students, including your own, were admitted to Gaza.
Thank you so much for having me. So first, the students, or this group of students who have been rejected, have been endeavoring to get a place into Irish universities, not only for a year, but for more than a year, maybe 3 years even, since the start of this genocide, because of what has happened to the educational system in Gaza. And they have deservedly secured places into Irish universities with fully funded scholarships. A few of the students have secured state-funded fully state-funded scholarships. The vast majority have funded privately or non-state funded scholarships. And what has happened that after they have filed their visa applications to the Irish Embassy in Tel Aviv and to the Irish Department of Foreign Affairs, they have received mass rejections. 20 students at least received rejections by mid-July last month. And then just a few days ago, another 15 were also rejected, and at least another 5 were also refused visas a couple or 3 days ago. And this number, we have now upwards of 40 who have been rejected so far by Irish immigration officials. This number could rise in the coming days because several others are still awaiting their decisions. And these students have been internally displaced in dilapidated tents. They have been suffering all this terror in Gaza by the Israeli military. And they are desperate. They've been really conscientious in applying for universities outside and to win these scholarships to get out of Gaza and continue their education and then to get back to Gaza. But this hasn't happened. Some of them are doctors who want to continue their education and get back when the healthcare sector is repaired, and it will help all Palestinians within the territory. Some of them are engineers, some of them are computer engineers, some of them are prospective journalists, and some of them are artists, some of them are as young as 20, and they haven't had a chance to continue their education, to even take on a bachelor's degree. And what has changed from last year and this year is that these conditions, these new draconian conditions, haven't been placed in the way of students last year. There was more flexibility. The students were not asked to meet impossible demands, and the situation in Gaza has gotten way, way worse. It has been exacerbated by the intense Israeli bombardment and the escalating genocide over the past year since I left Gaza. So the students cannot and will never be able in their lives to get what the Irish, or to meet the demands of the Irish government, which includes, as you said, accounting for educational gaps. And I don't know how reasonable it can be to ask students from Gaza who don't have a university left to show evidence of account for educational gaps and official bank statements. The banking system has been obliterated in Gaza, and for other demands that they have to show evidence of strong obligations to return home. And what's striking about it is that Israelis are still benefiting from visa-free travel to Ireland. 75 Irish Israeli citizens, according to the Dutch, have served in the Israeli military during the genocide. There haven't been any conditions, stringent conditions, placed on on them to come to the country. And Ukrainians in 2022, they enjoyed visa-free travel to the country. They mass applied for asylum in this country, and now what we're seeing, in my opinion, and I've asked other people about it, is racism, blatant, outright racism. That's what we're seeing.
Yeah. Abubaker, like you said, these aren't students who don't have firm plans or financial support. Many have fully funded scholarships, university places, and in some cases, accommodation or host families waiting for them. Could you take us through one or two individual cases and explain the reason Irish immigration authorities have given for rejecting them? Like, what are they officially saying? And how realistic is it to demand financial records, proof explaining gaps in education or employment, and evidence of an intention to return from people whose homes, universities, and public institutions Israel has destroyed, plus the amount of, the paperwork, the records that Israel has destroyed from the Gaza, civil administrations?
Yeah, well, we have looked through several rejection letters the students have received over the past month. And all the demands that we have seen, as I just said, are impossible to meet. It's unreasonable to ask. And I think it's another way to say no to these students. That's what I believe the Irish government intended to say to these students. Like, one of the demands was to show, as you said, financial records, huge financial records of tens of thousands of euros. And these students, their families have lost their work since the genocide. Their families have lost their homes since the genocide, and they have nothing left. So I don't know how they can ask students to meet such demands. And another one, which is like the most fascinating, shocking, and appalling part about it, is that these refusals can only be appealed by post, not by email, not by fax, which means that the appeal has to be sent from within Ireland or from within Gaza by the students. And this is something inhumane, unacceptable, and it speaks a lot about the Irish government. Like, there is not a single now standing post office in Gaza. All of them have been destroyed. In fact, before the genocide, there was only one or two formal post offices in Gaza. So how can these students send an appeal from Gaza? It needs years, literally years, if the Israelis allowed it in the first place. And when I spoke to the students, the disappointment that I feel is heartbreaking. And the Irish government,
just give us Abubaker. I mean, just give us an example, not their names, because for understandable reasons we haven't reported their names, but examples of just the stories of one or two students, who they are, what they studied, what they were hoping to study in Ireland.
So one of them wanted to study business. She hasn't got any further or higher education at all. She just finished high school. She worked her fingers to the bone to get a place in an Irish university and to get this funding. And when she received this rejection letter just a few weeks ago, she told me that she had felt shaken, and she cried a lot with her family. She desperately wanted to get out of Gaza and get the education. And in her own words to me, she said that she's very willing to get back to Gaza once her education is finished. So to ask the students to show evidence of obligations to return home, when you know that the Gaza students want to go back home and rebuild Gaza, is absolutely absurd. And the other student I talked to, she's a pharmacist, and she tried different countries before. She had a lot of hope in Ireland because the perception she has about Ireland is that it is a pro-Palestine, a super pro-Palestine country, and that it is the safest place for her. Despite I talked to her, she has filed every possible paper, all the needed documents to strengthen her visa application, but she was refused in the end for reasons like quality of documents, that the documents are not signed with a valid signature, and the students signed the documents as requested from them. And these are just two examples of the students. They're very heartbroken, as I just said. They don't know what's the way to get out of Gaza, and they feel that they have been sentenced to death.
Yeah, and of course, as you point out, these are students who have places and who have funding, and
They're
yet
not a burden to the government. They are not. They're funded by external donors.
right,
The
but they
Turkish
are
taxpayers
funded.
don't fund
Yeah,
them.
yeah. So
Yeah.
that they have private scholarships covering their studies. They have places in the universities, and yet they're being denied visas. And as you pointed out, I mean, I'll tell you, for many years before the genocide, we had friends and colleagues in Gaza who wanted us to mail them books, for example, or articles for their studies or research, and it's impossible. The idea, even before the genocide, of mailing something out of Gaza and it reaching Ireland was absurd. To expect people to send appeals only by mail and not by email. I mean, even in the West, people barely use the mail anymore. Everything is done electronically. So it just goes to show how bizarre and
They don't have a prick of conscience.
yeah, but what I want to ask you about now, Abubaker, is what are some of you in your reporting? You've talked to various experts, to professors, and to others about why this change of policy has happened. What are some of the reasons that people are giving, and what are the reactions in Ireland? You've written that there have been protests outside the Department of Justice, which is responsible ultimately for visas and immigration. And there was a protest yesterday. We have a video of you reporting from that protest. So just again, give us a sense of what experts or what observers or campaigners in Ireland are saying. Why do they think the government has changed its policy? And talk more about the protests and what you witnessed when you were there.
Yeah, I spoke to some TDs in the protest, and I spoke to some representatives.
And those are members of the Irish Parliament, TDs, for those who aren't familiar with the term.
Members of the Irish Parliament. And I spoke to some of the students. Some of them are international students, like the Palestinian students who come to this country to study. And they're all outraged. They're all appalled. They feel, especially specifically the Irish people, who feel a lot of disgrace by this decision, because they want them to come and to study. That's their ultimate and their very, very basic right. And there's a lot of speculation about why this has happened. A lot of people do believe that it's a racist policy against Palestinians. A lot of other people say that they want to appease the far right. Others would say that they want to appease the Israeli lobby, the United States. There's not a definitive answer to the question, but like the same identical applications were put in place last year, and they were accepted. They had different outcomes, but this year it's it's a very disappointing outcome, and the students were refused. So there's a huge question mark over why these students have been refused visas to come to Ireland. But according to the journalists I spoke to, they expect something like this to happen because of the Irish government's complicity in genocide and its horrific record.
Yeah. I mean, Abubaker, the Irish government has said that every application for these students is considered on its own merits, that applicants bear responsibility for providing sufficient documentation, and that it has no special arrangements for Palestinians. Although, at the same time, it claims to be acutely aware of the humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza. How do you suppose officials, lawmakers are reconciling that position with Ireland's reputation for solidarity with Palestine. Like you mentioned, Ireland, Irish civil society has been very vocal and supportive for the Palestinian struggle for liberation. Of course, there's so many comparisons with Ireland's struggle against British colonialism. And how do Palestinians understand the contrast between these barriers? Ireland's decision to waive visas for Ukrainians after Russia's invasion, and the visa-free entry that Ireland continues to grant Israeli citizens, of course. How are Palestinians understanding this, and what's been the response from the Irish government so far?
They're treating Palestinians, I would believe, as outcasts. I think that is reciprocated across Europe, because also in France has also halted its evacuations from Gaza for students and families and medical patients from Gaza to France, and in other countries as well. So I think I would believe it's a policy within the European Union, probably. But yeah, people are very shocked, and there is not a single, as I said, the conscience of these countries is not understandable. People do feel that the government feels a certain way about them, but the people are out in the streets calling on bringing the students out and helping the Palestinians. But as a matter of fact, the government hasn't actually listened to the people of Ireland over the past few years. It has actually submitted to the demands of the US government and of the Western imperialist powers. And we have seen that in reducing the occupied territories bill just to the goods, which is only 30% of the bill. And we've seen that in allowing consistently the use of Shannon Airport to transport weapons to Israel, to carpet bomb Gaza and kill Palestinians. And we've seen that in the Irish taxpayer, which has funded the air traffic for US military jets. And we've seen it in shackled Palestinians on US jets through Ireland. So we're not surprised, but the least that they can do after they have helped destroy the lives of these Palestinian students is to help them to get out. And they're not helping every single student. They are actually helping a few students who have, as I just said, worked their fingers to the bone to get a place outside Gaza. It is appalling. And I think Ireland's stance of neutrality is a myth. And the Irish government's solidarity is a myth. They're just talking that the Palestinian Authority thanks them, our countries thanks them. Of course, traitors would thank traitors. So it's just disgraceful.
Yeah. And it's really disappointing, because it certainly doesn't reflect the sentiment that I've encountered in Ireland, where there is real overwhelming support for people in Palestine, in particular opposition to the genocide. But we're very grateful to you for your reporting on this, Abubaker. You did publish that piece on August 5th, and you have another article that is forthcoming very soon on the Electronic Intifada with an update on this issue. So thank you for continuing to follow it and report on it. And people should look out for your new article, and of course follow you online. But we're going to shift now to some other topics we want to discuss with you while we have you. And of course you will have seen and heard from Nora in the news, and I know you follow the news very closely, Abubaker. On Wednesday, Israel carried out another attack on Palestinian civil police in Gaza. At least 9 people were killed, including Colonel Fatina Abdel-Jabbar al-Sahar, the head of the Women's Police Division. Many more people were wounded in the Israeli missile strike on that police post in a park in Gaza. Now, as you know, Abubaker, you know only too well that Israel has killed almost 1,300 Palestinians since last October's so-called ceasefire began. Just give us your reaction and sense of your reaction to these latest developments in Gaza.
I talk to people in Gaza almost daily, and they're always asking me, given the fact that I'm outside, and I speak to people and speak to other journalists, if there is any hope left that people can link to. And I always feel short of words what to say to them. People are afraid. Just yesterday, one of the young students who's also trying to get outside of Gaza has just sent me a message saying that it was just a few seconds between me and imminent death from this particular strike, which has killed the group of police officers and members. It's daily tax, daily targeting of people, civil police members, every sector of the Gaza Strip. Barely anything has improved. The prices are actually still very high. I talked to my family about it, talked to my friends about it, and the prices are still very high. A lot of people cannot afford. There have been new stats published by the Labor Ministry in Gaza. 95% of the population in Gaza at the moment, half of which are children, are mainly dependent on, or our main dependence on aid, on humanitarian aid. Israel has just recently, a few months ago, banned over 37 humanitarian organizations from operating freely and independently in Gaza. It continues to place or to impose barriers and new conditions on humanitarian organizations, workers, and medical staffers from outside to come to Gaza, which has definitely perpetuated the suffering within the Strip, and has also added to the burden of Palestinian medical workers in Gaza. And as you just said, like 1,300 people have been killed since the last October so-called ceasefire. That's more than the people who have been killed on October the 7th. Yet the so-called Board of Peace says that we're not going to allow such so-called or quote-unquote atrocities to happen again from the Gaza side. We're living in the love jungle. We're living in a very dark time, and people are horrified. They don't know what's next. Everyone is expecting to be killed at any point. The streets are scary for people to walk. The places are scary for people to visit. It was just a beachside cafe that was bombed, and child was killed, and women were killed. So it's a very tragic situation that is getting worse every single day. And I want to just point out something very important to people, that why these civil police members are being killed is because the Western mainstream media, including Arab and also Arab media outlets, have adopted a very racist narrative, cynical and pernicious one against civil sectors within Gaza. And they deliberately conflated throughout the genocide, through their reporting, between armed resistance groups and the civil sectors in Gaza, including the police members, particularly the police members. And I have met police members in Gaza when I was in Gaza and before that. Some of them have worked under the Palestinian Authority when the Palestinian Authority was in control of the Strip. They have no political affiliation at all. And Hamas in the end is a government, so there is a huge distinction between the two things. And this narrative, which was first circulating by the Israeli military and pro-Israel media personalities, has unfortunately succeeded in legitimizing the targeting of these people and officers. And as you just mentioned, one of the colonels is a woman, and there's no policy in armed resistance factions that women and children can be recruited in these groups. So there are no women in these groups, there are no children. And in fact, I don't know why we're trying to say this is this is a war crime or whatever, when in fact we are through a ceasefire. We're in a ceasefire. Targeting anything in Gaza is a violation of the ceasefire and a war crime. Whether Hamas, whether Fatah, whether whatever it is, it's a war crime. It's a violation of the ceasefire. We don't even have to rationalize why these targeted strikes are illegal in the first place. It's a very dire situation.
Yeah.
It is. And of course, under international law, to the extent that that matters these days, civilian police are civilian. They are not considered legitimate military targets. And of course, that's not to say that any of Israel's attacks are justified, but even within the framework of international law, which Israel claims to adhere to, it shouldn't be attacking civilian police who are, after all, just trying to bring law and order and organization to life in a Gaza that is absolutely devastated. Abubaker, I want to shift to another to an update on something that I know you're also following closely. At a trial in London this week, the jury has refused to convict 7 Palestine Action activists charged in connection with the August 2024 raid on an 𝐓𝐴𝐷 Systems weapons factory in Filton. After more than 38 hours of deliberation, jurors returned no verdicts on charges of criminal damage and violent disorder against Madeleine Norman, Hannah Davidson, 𝐓𝐿𝐿 𝐄𝐥𝐞𝐜𝐿 Herbich, Ian Sanders, William Plasto, and Yulia Brigadirova. The judge had already dismissed the violent disorder charge against one of the defendants. The defendants were accused of assisting or encouraging the raid, in which the activists destroyed 40 Israeli weapons, including quadcopter drones. They had previously been acquitted of aggravated burglary, the most serious charge, but the British government insisted on retrying them. Several of the defendants had spent between 15 and 18 months in prison awaiting trial, extraordinarily long periods, despite not having been convicted of any offense. Now, 4 other Palestine activists involved in the same raid were previously sentenced as terrorists on the basis of criminal damage convictions. During this latest trial, the jury asked whether these defendants could also be sentenced as terrorists if convicted. And of course, they went on to refuse to convict them. And in related news, Palestine Action co-founder Huda Amouri confirmed earlier this month that the UK Supreme Court is going to hear her appeal against the British government's decision to ban Palestine Action as a terrorist organization. Those hearings will take place in November and will be live streamed. But for the time being, it remains a criminal offense in the UK to express any support for Palestine Action. And British police continue to arrest activists and charge them for violating that ban. I also, before getting your comment, Abubaker, I want to mention that as we speak, Jewish anti-Zionist author and activist Tony Greenstein is on trial in London for a social media post he made in 2023. Tony faces a charge under Section 12 of the Terrorism Act. That law treats even what it calls moral support or approval of what the British government defines as a terrorist group as criminal conduct that carries a maximum sentence of 14 years in prison. This is shockingly draconian and repressive and has no place in any country calling itself a democracy. And I just want to point out that earlier this month, I participated in an online webinar in support of Tony Greenstein, and one of the speakers in that webinar was Annette Norman, the mother of Madeleine Norman, one of the Palestine actionists who that jury just refused to convict just yesterday. But in this video from the Canary, you can see Tony Greenstein speaking to reporters outside Kingston Crown Court just before his trial started this week. So I just wanted to take this opportunity to extend my solidarity to Tony again, and of course to all those who are facing these unjust trials. And I hope that the jury in his case will also see how absurd and repressive this trial is. So Abubaker, I know you follow these things closely, so I wanted to get your reaction to that verdict in this trial. And, again, a jury in the UK refusing to convict activists who participated in the destruction of Israeli weapons being manufactured in Britain to attack your community in Gaza.
First, I think the British regime state has gone insane more than ever, and it's getting worse every month. And I don't see any hope in the appointment of Andy Burnham as the new Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. I think he and Keir Starmer are faces of the same coin. So it's no surprising, because he said that his party got it wrong on Palestine or on the genocide in Gaza. He didn't even name it as a genocide. So if he wants to get it right, then these Palestine action activists shouldn't be put through or embroiled in such situations. But really, my full solidarity as someone who has lived the horrors in Gaza, and I know a lot of people in Gaza also know about these Palestine action activists. My full solidarity with them, a message of love, a lot of love and hope to them. And I really, a big shout out to 𝐓𝐿𝐿 𝐄𝐥𝐿 𝐈𝐧𝐭𝐫𝐿 and all the others who have endured the unbearable, and they haven't flinched at all in support of Palestine. And these are the examples, like she's the example that we all need to learn from. She's a roughly 30-year-old woman. She has sacrificed her life, over 3 years now of her life, just to show her unwavering support for the Palestinians who continue to be genocided in Gaza and terrorized across the West Bank. And it's coming out of a position of sincerity and love and solidarity. And we're so proud of 𝐓𝐿 and the others. We're so proud of them and for what they have done. And I hope that they will never be convicted, because it's farcical. And people who are opposing genocide, or are even like holding placards opposing genocide, are being locked up, while the people who have perpetrated the genocide are running amok across the country. And this is where we are. It's never been a democracy. It's never a democracy. But these people, my absolute love to them, and I really wish them the best. And we all have to learn from them how to take direct action against the genocide.
Yeah. Well, finally, Abubaker, as we approach the 3rd anniversary of this ongoing genocide, what do you think people around the world should be doing to keep up the pressure and continue supporting people in Gaza? Is now the time to stay quiet or, get involved in something else? What's important for people to be doing right now?
Yeah, I think a lot of people have quite forgotten about Gaza in the past 9 months since the so-called ceasefire began. And it's really tearing my heart apart how people have shifted from sympathy to apathy. And I really want people to know that your taxes are still funding this genocide, and that they have to step up and stand in solidarity with the people, to come out on the streets and learn from Palestine Action how to take direct action against the genocide. And they have to continue divesting and boycotting and protesting. That's the least. Like today, I have just read the news, and he has posted about it brazenly. A Jordanian American of Palestinian descent. He's a CEO of the business Replete. It's a technology business. And he has said in his own words, he's excited for a partnership with OpenAI. And OpenAI has been reportedly and allegedly being complicit in supporting the Israeli military in identifying targets in Gaza and mass murdering people. So how people, and his grandparents are Palestinian. It really disappoints me how people have been acting since this so-called ceasefire started. I want people to do what they can and to expose the pro-genocide or the genocidal companies, and to pressure mayors, to pressure the government officials to ensure that there is no investment in genocide. And if we don't stop this, the Palestinians will continue to be killed. And for the Palestinian Americans in particular, weren't it for geography, they would have been in Gaza. They would have been mass killed instead of our people, instead of our families. It's just geography and luck that they were born in different places. And instead of posting your restaurant pics and your trips and about your daily life like ceaselessly, just feel us. Just stop feeling that you have the right to enjoy everything, every bit of your life, and forget about us. This is your responsibility, and people have hope in you, and people want you to come out in the streets and do whatever you can. You can't let this happen in front of your eyes and just stand by.
That's so important, Abubaker. I think we all struggle with how to maintain our own energy, but more importantly, how to maintain and to keep going with collective action.
Yeah.
There is a lot going on, but I don't feel that it's enough given the scale of the ongoing genocide, massacres every day, and it barely makes the headlines. So we so appreciate that reminder, Abubaker. And also, of course, there continue to be ways. We can't recommend any particular organization, but we have reported on, for example, in the news, Nora mentioned the Samir project, which is ongoing, which a lot of people support. And there are a lot of still individual initiatives that are ways to support people in Gaza. Do you think those types of things are effective? Should people still be supporting things like that?
Thank you for reminding me of that. I think people now have a wrong image about what is happening in Gaza. That aid is getting in large amounts, and people have enough food, have enough water, and they have a normal life and access to everything, to medical supplies and everything, which is wrong. And I really want to remind people that people are still in desperate need of your donations, and of your direct funding to the individual fundraisers and to mutual aid projects like the Samira project, because the big humanitarian organizations, the aid that they're trying to send to Gaza is just stuck at the border. It won't reach people. So the only way, the most effective way, I would believe, since I've been talking to people in Gaza, is to directly contribute to the fundraisers of these individuals and to the mutual aid projects who are trying to maintain or to help these very vulnerable families within the Strip. So I really hope people do understand this. I really hope that people will continue to donate to these people, because without them, actually, and it's from what I've heard in the ground, and since I was in Gaza and after I left Gaza, that it is the biggest factor or the biggest contribution to the well-being of Palestinians during the Holocaust of Gaza is people's individual contributions from the outside. So please continue that and continue helping these people. The genocide hasn't ended. Nothing has been salvaged in the Strip, and things are just getting worse.
Thank you for that reminder, Abubaker. Nora.
No, I was just going to say, it's just, I don't know. I'm always struck with, the unbearable desperation that people are living through in Gaza. And, we're talking about ongoing food insecurity. In the news report, we talked about the warning that the Gaza municipality just put out about water being completely depleted from Gaza and the overflow of open sewage. And there are still, chickenpox cases. I think there's like 10,000 chickenpox cases right now. Again, anesthesia, antibiotics, basic medications, dialysis supplies and spare parts for machines, for diagnostics, basic elements of sustaining life in Gaza are gone and quickly disappearing. And it feels like I talk to many people here who see the situation in Gaza and feel hopeless and feel helpless and feel paralyzed. And obviously that is understandable because of how unbelievable the situation is. But what would you say to people who are like, well, we can't do anything, so we might as well not try to help? I mean, is hopelessness an effective strategy right now? What would you say to that?
I mean, God forbid were their families, they wouldn't have said that. And it's enraging. It's not a point of showing sympathy anymore. How people have been reacting to this. I mean, you're looking at 2 million people living in 30% of the original space of the Gaza Strip. That is a little over 100 square kilometers. How can people live? I talk to my family, I talk to my friends, they're living over each other. Tents are dotting the streets, are dotting everywhere. Places are packed, hospitals are inundated, are very overwhelmed with people and with injuries. And this continues every single day. The luxury of life people have outside and the fact that they're living on the hug does not give them the right to say, well, I'm hopeless and whatever. That is absolutely inhumane to say. People are not hopeless. People want to be hopeless. People want to feel that they can exonerate themselves from what they are doing and from their helplessness. I think that is appalling to say. And I have a family back home. I fear for them and I fear for my friends. I have a friend as well who's a doctor who goes to treat patients. He may be killed at any single point. I have cousins. I have others. If you put yourself in my situation, which is nothing to anyone in the Gaza Strip right now, you wouldn't say that. You wouldn't say that. And I just want to reiterate this point. If people really, when it hits them, like the prices of gas have increased, if they went out in the streets, closed the roads, went on the global strikes, and blocked the airways that facilitated genocide and the naval passages that facilitated genocide, this all wouldn't have happened. This all wouldn't have happened. That's on the regimes of the Arab world and the Western world, I agree. But that's also on the people who have just stood by. And it's making me very angry. It's making me very irritated. The people who are leading and controlling us are monstrous, are fiendish ghouls. They don't care about human lives. They don't care about human rights. They don't care about anyone. They don't care. So why are you not doing this? Capitalism is a cancer. Imperialism that controls capitalism is a cancer. And we have to get rid of that. And if people continue standing by, it will haunt them and it will reach them. It will have consequences. And then they would say, we wish we could do something about Gaza so this wouldn't affect us on the scale that we are living through. And I'm reminding people they will regret, and there will be no time for regret, no room for regret when it comes to them. And it will come to them. These Western and Arab regimes are ready to sacrifice their own people for imperialism and for colonialism and for also capitalism. They will sacrifice you. And I'm reminding people of that. And this, as you continue standing by and not doing anything about it, it will come and haunt you and will affect you. And these leaders, monstrous leaders who have funded the genocide, will sacrifice you like animals.
Thank you, Abubaker. Very powerful, and you certainly speak to a lot of how I feel, and I think how a lot of us listening feel. And it's the constant challenge for us to stay motivated and to find ways to keep motivating those around us. So thank you for those words. Just before we let you go, while we've been live, your latest article for the Electronic Intifada has just been published, and here it is. You can see there, published today, 20 August. Irish government under fire over Palestinian student visa rejection. So, there are people protesting and speaking out in Ireland who are determined to reverse this policy. And that photo shows by Abdurrahman Ismail shows people protesting against this government policy of arbitrarily denying visas to students. So thank you for your reporting, and stay on that story. And I hope that the next time we talk to you about this, which I hope will be soon, you'll have some good news for us.
Thank you so much for having me, and all the best. And it's always nice to be here.
It's
Thank you so
always
much.
a
Thank
pleasure
you,
to have you,
Abubaker.
Abubaker. And we, from the time you were in Gaza, from your first appearances on this live stream from Gaza, you're reporting from Gaza, despite sometimes really difficult circumstances, which you didn't always talk about, but you certainly lived through them. You've always been a source of determination and hope, and we really appreciate that.
We'll always hope. And thanks to the audience and every single one watching. We all love you, and we want you to continue doing what you can and everything for a noble cause, for a cause that matters to all of us. Thanks very much.
You're our
Thanks,
yellow rose,
Abubaker.
Abubaker. We're so proud.
Thank you so much.
Got my yellow rose here always. All right.
Oh,
Amazing.
yeah. It's
So
good to see him.
grateful to Abubaker. Yeah.
Always.
Yeah.
And his reporting, I mean, it's always been spectacular, but especially on this story lately, he's been just remarkable.
and I really think that it's helping to drum up pressure, and that's what effective journalism should be. It's about reporting things fairly and factually, but it's also about making the world better, and that's one of the impacts that I hope it will have.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna go to Jon in a few minutes, but before then, we have a quick remark by Asa Winstanley about some other developments in the UK. And before we go to that, I just wanted to say that it was brought to my attention that the video that we played at the very end of the news report of that beautiful song being sung by that young girl, the song itself apparently is not a traditional folk song, but it is a song by a modern pop singer, Saint Levant. So I will get in touch with We Are Not Numbers and see if we can correct that on both of our ends. But I just wanted to mention that for transparency's sake.
I knowing absolutely nothing about modern pop songs would not have spotted that.
It sounded like a folk song. So, and We Are Not Numbers thought it was a folk song, and they're based in Gaza. So, but we'll issue a correction on that, of course. So before we get to Jon, let's go to Asa, and then we'll come right back.
This is Asa Winstanley reporting for the Electronic Intifada. You're watching and listening to the Electronic Intifada live stream. Early this month, a top employment tribunal here in the UK established an important precedent that enshrines new protections in law for anti-Zionists. Sacked Bristol University professor David Miller took his former employer to an employment tribunal for violating his rights under equality legislation, namely the right to hold a protected philosophical belief, and that belief is anti-Zionism. 2 years ago, Miller won his case and the university appealed the decision to a higher tribunal. But 2 weeks ago, the Employment Appeal Tribunal rejected the university's attempt to overturn the original decision, arguing that the sacking for, quote, gross misconduct had been correct. Miller was a professor of political sociology at the university until October 2021, when the university sacked him after a decade-long campaign of harassment by pro-Israel groups. A wide range of right-wing figures, anti-Palestinian activists, and Israel lobbyists made a massive effort to twist the arm of the university, demanding Miller be fired, with even British politicians piling on. As Miller himself wrote in this February 2021 piece for the Electronic Intifada, quote, Britain is in the grip of an assault on its public sphere by the State of Israel and its advocates. Meaningful conversations about anti-black racism and Islamophobia have been drowned out by a concerted lobbying campaign targeting universities, political parties, the equalities regulator, and public institutions all over the country. In a statement this month welcoming the new decision, Miller said the following: "I am very pleased that the Employment Appeal Tribunal has dismissed the case put forward by the University of Bristol. It is a remarkable and extremely welcome vindication of my long fight to defend myself and all those who hold and express anti-Zionist beliefs. This judgment has now firmly established that anti-Zionist views are a protected belief under the terms of the Equality Act 2010. I now look forward to returning to work as Professor of Political Sociology at the University of Bristol, to have my career reinstated and to be free to work in higher education without fear of intimidation or reprisal." Zilla Rahman, one of Miller's lawyers and a partner at the firm Rahman Lowe, said the following: "This is a comprehensive victory. Dr. Miller's belief that Zionism is inherently racist has now been recognized by a binding appellate authority as a protected philosophical belief. We are proud to have played a part in securing recognition of the legal right to hold that belief, and we hope his judgment will provide reassurance and guidance for others in the future." In a withering 45-page ruling, Douglas Fairley, the president of the Employment Appeals Tribunal, dismissed every count of the university's appeal with what seemed almost to be a wearying contempt. And you can get an indication of that weariness in this little quote here, where he wrote that Bristol University's submission to the Higher Appeal Tribunal had, quote, 9 grounds of appeal. These are very lengthy because the majority of them contain subgrounds and in some cases sub-subgrounds, each of which alleges a separate error of law. I read the ruling, or most of the ruling anyway, earlier this week, and in a nutshell, the judge dismissed them all. After a public witch hunt, the university had sacked Miller after the Israel lobby campaign, using as its pretext several public statements in which he criticized Zionism, the Israeli state ideology, as a racist and colonial ideology. The university repeatedly investigated Miller, including to find out whether he had exceeded the boundaries of acceptable speech. But no less than 2 internal reports exonerated him. Despite that, Miller was still sacked at the behest of the Israel lobby, including the Board of Deputies of British Jews, the Zionist Federation, the Jewish Labour Movement, and the Community Security Trust, all organisations with indirect links to the State of Israel, and in some cases with direct links to the State of Israel, including the Community Security Trust, ostensibly a charity which is meant to defend British Jews, having in the past been trained by Israel's Mossad spy agency. The tribunal found in 2024, and the appeals tribunal has upheld this month, that the following definition of anti-Zionism, as held by David Miller and also by this reporter, are protected philosophical beliefs under the UK employment law, and it was therefore illegal to sack Miller for holding these beliefs. Quote, A. Political Zionism, which the claimant defines as an ideology that a state for Jewish people ought to be established and maintained in the territory that formerly comprised the British Mandate of Palestine, is inherently racist, imperialistic, and colonial, and B. Political Zionism ought therefore to be opposed. The ruling enshrines some important legal protections for anti-Zionists in the UK law, making it much harder for employers to sack them, as has been happening increasingly since the beginning of the Gaza genocide and subsequent expressions of outrage amongst people of conscience in the UK. We've seen, like in America and increasingly in Europe, we've seen doctors especially targeted for this, people in public services who have expressed any kind of solidarity with Palestinians, even very simple ones such as Palestine flag pins on their lapels and so forth, very low-key expressions of support with Palestinians and solidarity, have been persecuted by their employers, including the NHS, the National Health Service here in the UK. So I think the implications of this new ruling solidifying David Miller's victory, his right to uphold his anti-Zionist beliefs and express them without being fired, are going to be pretty wide-reaching, and having them enshrined in UK law like this is it's a massively important victory, and is something that David has been working on for many years now. If you want to learn more about the details of Miller's initial legal win, you can watch this segment of our live stream from 2024, in which we invited on the stream to talk about his win.
Wow, that is a huge development.
Yeah, great news. Really good news. And it shows, you know, and there's another recent legal victory in the Supreme Court of New South Wales in Australia.
Yeah.
Basically, ridiculing isn't the right word, but saying that the so-called IHRA definition of anti-Semitism is of no use and is
It should be
basically
ridiculed.
inadmissible. Yes. Now, I haven't.
Yes.
I've read reports about that ruling. I haven't read it yet. I will, but I just wanted to make the point that with this ruling that Asa just reported on and other challenges around the world, it's worth fighting back. You know, for David Miller, his entire career, not just his job, but his career and his reputation were on the line. So he had a strong motivation to fight back. But we all benefit from these precedents where we are really trying to push back against these efforts by Israel and its lobby and its accomplices to limit free speech and what we can say, and to put a fence around Israel so that basically they equate criticism of Israel or opposition to its genocide with, you know, bigotry against Jews, which is, of course, a ridiculous equation.
I mean, it also is a really important exposure of the contradictions of Zionism and, you know, the state apparatuses that try to protect it, as, you know, as the ideology of a genocidal apartheid ethnocracy, and how it can't be legally you can't legally enforce a political opinion, and try to tie it to identity. It is a racist colonial political ideology, and it should be ridiculed, and it should be it should be fought against. And so this is an important step in doing that.
Yeah, and it's because, you know, we've talked about on many shows and in many articles the collapse in Israel's standing around the world, unprecedented lows, unprecedented negative ratings. And that is precisely why these governments and lobby groups are turning to repression. It is because we, who just see Palestinians as humans having rights like everyone else ought to have, we are the majority. They are the minority.
That's right. That's right. And they're clawing their way out of trying to claw their way out of this by just expanding repressive measures and trying to criminalize seeing Palestinians as humans. And so, so it should amplify our own activism and organizing against that. All right, let's bring on Jon. There we go. There he is. It's been a busy few weeks on so many different fronts. Jon, what have you been looking at closely? And what
we're going to look into the fact that the U.S. isn't going to be able to continue this war with Iran because of the lack of key munitions that we have been following really for 3 years or 2 years, at least since True Promise 1, when it was obvious that the missile math, the interceptor math versus the ability of Iran to produce ballistic missiles was wildly in Iran's favor, that the longer the war would go on, that would be more and more of an issue. And we're starting to see that now penetrate into the corporate media. So
interesting.
We had you guys out a month or two ahead of the curve on that. And we're going to follow that up today, and also a little bit on Lebanon.
Great. All right. Ali, do the honors.
Take it away, Jon.
All right, you are watching and listening to the Electronic Intifada. I am Jon Elmer. This is the Resistance Report on day 1049 of Israel's genocide in Gaza, day 174 of the U.S.-Israeli war with Iran, the 60-day Memorandum of Understanding ceasefire framework, deadline passed just the other day, so that 60 days has passed. There has been a pause in large-scale fighting in the month of August, but that follows on July, which saw a significant exchange of fire, the most that we had seen since the early June memorandum was signed. So this war of choice started by the US and Israel has no end in sight. They're losing the war they started, and that's something that is even starting to penetrate into the corporate press in the United States, which we'll take a quick look at some of that reporting. We won't dwell too long on it. We'll also be covering Iran's hollowing out of the United States Air Force's MQ-9 Reaper drone fleet, the workhorse of the US Air Force's hunter-killer drones. But we're going to start, as always, in the Strait of Hormuz. Let's take a look at the maps. I got you a new satellite image here that shows, it shows the Middle East all through the center of the map there. On the left is the Red Sea down into the Bab el-Mandeb choke point down there, which the Yemenis have included into the blockade, part of a blockade of Saudi, but also part of the larger war in Iran as well. If you look over to the right, you can see Iran is up on the top of the screen in the corner. If you follow down there, you can see the Strait of Hormuz, the key choke point into the Persian Gulf, from which 20% of the world's oil before the war flowed. So just to give you that sense, Iran has stated clearly that the Strait of Hormuz will never go back to the pre-war status, and it will not be open unless the U.S. adheres to the Memorandum of Understanding, including to stop threatening in any language whatsoever the genocidal threats of Trump, erasing a civilization. He said the other day that they were going to carry out the largest attack since World War II. He said that just a couple of days, or maybe the day after the anniversary of the dropping of the atomic bombs by the US in Japan. So that kind of language is clearly stated in the Memorandum of Understanding not to be continued, but also the ending of the war on all the fronts, on Iran and its allies, Lebanon, Palestine, Yemen, and Iraq, the lifting of the naval blockade and withdrawing of its U.S. naval forces and air force from the vicinity of Iran, the paying of reparations for the two aggressive and imposed wars on Iran, lifting the unjust and illegal sanctions imposed on the Iranian people, and releasing unconditionally the frozen stolen assets of the Iranian people. This is all clearly stated out in the Memorandum of Understanding. And again, we will be looking at oil flows through the Strait of Hormuz in a moment here, but let's take a look at the other, we'll overlay this map of U.S. bases in the region. These are the 17 core bases in the region. The red triangles are where soldiers were admitted to be killed. The yellow triangles, as we know from the first phase of the war, are bases that are largely destroyed. And the United States is going to have to grapple with the future in the Middle East of this security architecture, because repairing these bases is something that, under the current situation of no end in sight of this war, is not something that can happen without a comprehensive settlement of the Iran-US war. But also you can see each of those countries: Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar, UAE, particularly Qatar, Bahrain, and the UAE. They claim they were not consulted on this war in the first place, this war of choice by Netanyahu and Trump. And they continue to appeal to Trump to not return to war, because, as Iran promised before the war started, it would be a regional war, and all of these countries hosting U.S. bases would be the targets of attacks. And should the U.S. attacks expand, the targeting inside those countries would expand as well. So the IRGC said that all 17 of these bases were targeted during the July exchange of fire, just making it clear from Iran's point of view that this will always be a regional war, and it will always be escalating from the previous point. We're not going back to square one on this war. Strategically, Iran understands that the Strait of Hormuz it is under their control, and there's absolutely nothing that the United States can do about it except send out idiotic tweets and AI videos on their official White House accounts, none of which we will show you here because you are all above that. Let's look at number 3, the bases map here from the Congressional Research Service, so you can see where each of those U.S. bases are. These are all bases that we have talked about for the entirety of this war, because they are in constant threat from Iranian ballistic missiles, and the degradation of the radar apparatuses of the United States throughout the region have been destroyed by Iranian attacks, and leaves them more vulnerable today than at any point in the war. And that is the case going forward with each step of this war. The right-wing American Enterprise Institute released a report just the other day that they estimated that the cost to rebuild the bases in the Middle East would be more than $5 billion, which I will say is a wildly conservative undercount, considering the loss of the facilities. Maybe they're just talking facilities and not the billion-dollar radars, hundreds of millions of dollar radars that need to be replaced as well. But you can see that this war has pressed the U.S. security architecture into the Middle East, into a point where pulling up stakes and leaving the region is not a pipe dream. It is probably an economically prudent thing for the United States to do. It's obvious that all of these countries don't feel protected by the U.S. security architecture, and should this war escalate into targeting wholesale, like Trump promised, infrastructure and industry, that these Gulf states don't stand a chance in that war. And of course, these maps always show how close those countries are to the shores of Iran, giving Iran all the tools in at its disposal to fight these battles. Let's take a look at number 4. This is the transit scheme through here. We've talked about this a lot, but you can see where the ships are being targeted if they go on that pretty dangerous Omani route through shallow water. I've shown you a bunch of maps over the time about just how shallow that water, those islands off Oman are. But those are the areas where the ships are being targeted. In between is the previous traffic separation scheme, and above is the new traffic separation scheme that the Iranians are handling. This is normally 20 million barrels a day are passing through the Strait of Hormuz, 20% of the world's oil. And industry analysts expected a shock, right? We thought $150 plus for barrels of oil, that the price would skyrocket, that there would be a global recession that the World Bank said was going to happen. Trump said it was going to happen too. He didn't want to be Herbert Hoover, he said, who was the president going into the Depression. But really, there's a couple reasons why this has been delayed, but not prevented in any way. It's simply been kicked down the road, and that is because of the drawdown, massive drawdown of strategic reserves in the United States and in Japan as well. But the key to this all has been China, who cut their imports by 50% in the period of this that we're talking about, of this Iran war. So from early 2026, and that's roughly 5% of the global demand. And China was able to do this through massive energy stockpiling that has happened over the past 12 months. And their strategic reserves are more than 1 billion barrels. But again, these are ways to pause, to postpone, to push down the line the problems that are simply not sustainable. This war cannot go on indefinitely without a significant global impact. Oman and Iran are in negotiations about the transit scheme through the Strait of Hormuz, but Iran has said that those negotiations do not equal the opening of the Strait of Hormuz. All of the previous things that the U.S. has to do, demands on the U.S. that they agreed to, have to be upheld before the Strait of Hormuz will see normal traffic. There are, though, normal traffic passing through the through the Iranian waters, and we can see that on this next image, number 5 here we're at. You can see this. This is the AIS tracking for vessels, and this comes from the United Kingdom's Maritime Trade Operations, 𝐄𝐥𝐿 Maritime Trade Operations, 𝐄𝐥𝐿. These are naval, U.S. allied naval organization. And you can see that the mass number of ships that have crossed on the Iranian channel. So they have been safe on the Iranian channel, except for the United States targeting them to try to make people not use that route. But of course, the U.S. doesn't have enough ships to match the bluster of their of Trump's wall of steel idiocy. They just don't have the capabilities in the region right now. Previous to the war, 140 ships crossed through the Strait of Hormuz. Now, if we look at the next slide, you'll see the numbers as they are as of last week, like decimated, literally. And so these are also American numbers. This is from the Joint Maritime Information Center. This is the allied combined maritime forces of the US, the UK, and their allies that are doing this work. So they also have the ability, presumably, to log ships that didn't have their AIS on. But as we have seen, and we'll see again in this report, the United States does not have the resources in any way to continue to press this blockade militarily. And that's why we have seen over the past few days, the talk from the White House is about an economic war on Iran. So something Iran has already experienced for the last 45 years or so. Quick math, but yeah, they are more than ready for economic warfare. And the fact is that when the US is moving to that, they're admitting defeat on the military front. Let's take a look at number 7, because the Yemenis joined the blockade as well. And here is a ship that attempted to fill at a pipeline that passes the Strait of Hormuz and head up, a Saudi vessel heading up into the Red Sea. And it was turned back by the Yemeni armed forces. You can see it there just before it enters the Bab el-Mandeb. And that has been something that has taken a bite out of the other main choke point, the Bab el-Mandeb. Dropsite quoted a Kepler study that tracked Saudi oil flows through the Bab el-Mandeb have fallen from more than 4 million barrels per day in mid-July to about 1 million per day by the end of the month. That's according to researcher Rory Johnston. By July 31st, Kepler had already fallen below 2 million barrels. So another few million barrels taken off the market due to the blockade on the Red Sea as well. Now let's take a look at number 8, because we'll remember all of this was supposed to be fixed, this was the deal, whatever Trump said, the best deal ever, hugely awesome deal. This is him signing it in Versailles. He signed it in Farsi and English, so there's no question that he understands what was in the 14-point plan. The 14-point plan was written for him. It's less than 700 words, which is still probably more than he would have liked, but it is something that he can grapple with at least. Diesel prices this week went over $100 a barrel. The American Automotive Association said that gas is up 30%, diesel's up 50%, jet fuel's up 70%. Mark Zandi, chief economist at Moody's Analytics, said that a typical household in the United States has already paid $1,000 because of this war. Most of that in gasoline prices. The rest of the knock-on effects will come later to that. And that is what he described that as the absolute floor of the cost to each family. So the cost of military failure is passed on to the American public. It's also passed on to American soldiers and sailors, which you can see in this next slide. The sailors aboard the aircraft carrier USS Abraham Lincoln have been trying to jump overboard amid their extended deployment. They have been at sea for more than 200 days without a port call. Trump mocked that and said they should be at sea for longer. And the reason why they are at sea is because the Iranians have prevented traffic from the US into the Gulf, which is where they would fill up and restock their ships. So they're blocked from that through the Iranian blockade, through the Iranian military capacity to block the strait. The United States knows that, and that's why there was only one instance of sneaking ships through to try to rescue one of the ships that was inside there. But they're not doing anything like this to get ships through the strait, and they were fired on repeatedly as they did that, and they're not going to be, I don't think, doing those trips much, if at all. So the reason why these carriers are in such dire conditions is because they're constantly being fired on. They can't go on to shore because they're blocked from their resupply bases. They're multi-billion-dollar resupply bases like the one in Bahrain, the naval support base in Bahrain. So the 5,000 sailors and Marines that are on the USS Abraham Lincoln have been sending messages to their families, and the CENTCOM, Central Command, the U.S. military command responsible for the Middle East, has confirmed that one sailor went overboard and was saved. But in another incident, in a separate incident aboard the Lincoln, this is from Navy Times. As you can see, this article on the screen is the same article from Navy Times. So they rescued one sailor who went overboard. But in a separate incident aboard the Lincoln, a sailor on watch saw a shipmate preparing to go overboard, and he intervened, according to the sailor's wife. Her husband called out to the sailor before reaching the individual and grabbing their arms and pulling them back onto the deck. Her husband told her the sailor had not yet gone over the side. When he got there, three other sailors heard the commotion and came running. And to this all, Trump has said that 266 straight days at sea because you're cut off from your supply lines by military failure is not long enough out at sea. So literally throwing troops under the bus, throwing them overboard in this case. So these are just stories that have penetrated into the media, into the corporate media, into the military media about the situation of this war now 175 days on. Let's take a look at number 10 because they also don't have any missiles. I showed you this last show with some graphs from think tanks, but this is now in the week that you didn't see me. This is now, as I said, penetrated into the corporate media. This is a Reuters saying it's an exclusive. It's not really an exclusive. It's a now known facts that the U.S. has used virtually all of its long-range precision missiles during this war. So that's tactical ballistic missiles that it's firing from all of the countries in the region who are asking them not to fire from there because it brings attacks on them. In any case, this doesn't seem to be much of a problem anymore because their $1 million missiles are virtually out of stock. And Reuters said that there was a framework deal between Raytheon, the parent company of the Tomahawk cruise missile, to boost to 1,000 units a year from their current rate of 60 per year. So 60 per year since this war started in 2023. They've made 120 Tomahawk cruise missiles and fired those off within hours of the first day of the war. So not looking good on the weapons front. This next slide shows you defensive weapons. These are the missile interceptors. The Washington Post remarked on an empty arsenal. In the first month of the war, the U.S. fired off more than 850 Tomahawk cruise missiles and more than 1,000 Patriot and THAAD interceptors. The U.S. used more than 1,300 of the Army's tactical ballistic missiles in the initial weeks of fighting. And as I reported last show, as of last week, the global inventory of Patriot missiles has fallen from 2,200 before the war to 827, while the THAAD missiles have gone from 452 to 278. So this 50 days of war, plus a little bit of tit for tat during the MOU, means that the United States cannot even fight another 50-day war because they're well below half on all of these munitions And just something from the U.S. Missile Defense Agency's maximum production rate is 96 THAAD interceptors per year, but they didn't deliver THAAD interceptors in the last year and a half. But the Pentagon is seeking now 857 of them in the next year's defense budget, and almost 2,600 over the next 5 years. According to the U.S. Missile Defense Agency's maximum production rate, it would require approximately 27 years to fulfill those requests. So this is not something that is being fixed soon. It's not something that's being fixed in Trump's presidency. This is a long-term issue. It's a 3 to 5 year production line for all of these missiles. Effectively, they're handmade, these missiles. These are not on massive, mechanical lines like a truck factory. These are very precise engineering feats, and they use extremely expensive rare earth minerals and all kinds of electronics. They need skilled workers that the United States currently doesn't have, and an industrial base that has been really hollowed out in the United States. So these are real significant issues of fighting capacity for the United States. And the fact that this is out in the media, these numbers are conservative. So it's a worse situation than what this indicates. But let's take a look at the drones, because this story came out this week from the Washington Post, which cited a Air Force officer saying that the Iranians had knocked out at least 45 of the United States Reaper drone arsenal, which comes out to more than 25%. Again, these are conservative numbers on something that is an absolute, because the MQ-9 Reaper production line, has been halted, and it has been halted for more than 2 years. They're not making these drones anymore. Every loss is an absolute loss. And it's even unclear if this 45 tally, which quickly became 46 because the Iranians shot another one down the other day. If that tally includes the 7 Reaper drones that Iran shot down in July, we watched many of those on this program crash to the ground. So you can see where this math is going, and it's not going in the direction for the United States. The Air Force said unprecedented levels of destruction of their fleet is proof of how useful that fleet is. But in actual fact, these drones were built for uncontested skies, while Yemen and Iran are very much contested. And these lumbering aircraft that have massive radar signatures, the radar bounces around between the vehicle and the weapons pylons that are shiny metal hanging off the wings. They're just very easy to shoot down, particularly with the 358 missile that Iran and the Yemenis have both used. The Yemenis themselves have taken down 25 Reaper drones. So you add that to the at least 45, and the U.S. is admitting 70 of their drones. Going into this war before 2023, the maximum number of drones that the U.S., MQ-9 drones that the U.S. had was 200. They're talking now here, at the Senate Senate Armed Services Committee, and Air Force officer said that they have 135 left right now. And like I said, the production line ended 2 years ago, which means that they're not replacing these. They're actually they're still at the brainstorming stage in the Pentagon of what kind of drone is going to replace the Reaper for its hunter-killer capacities. This is both the surveillance drone, but as we know well, in Afghanistan and Iraq, they're also drones that carry out airstrikes, and it is their primary workhorse for that. So even before the Iran war, the Yemenis had knocked out more than 10% of the drone fleet just in the Battle of the Red Sea that started in October 2023 in solidarity with Gaza. And the IDF, for their part, they admitted early in the war that, quote, dozens of comparable drones were shot down by Iran. They won't say the actual number, and we know that several more were shot down by Hezbollah air defenses that have destroyed Elbit, Hermes, and Heron drones in the air. again, all things that you have watched on the Resistance Report. Let's take a look at the next slide here, or the next video here. This is a clip from Iranian state TV showing a highlight of these drones being shot down. Each of these, that's a fighter jet that was clipped there. That was the F-35 that was clipped. But we know the F-15s, multiple F-15s have been shot down. For the U.S. doctrine, the U.S. flies 56 combat lines, combat air patrols with Reaper drones. And according to doctrine, they should have 4 for each combat air patrol. So 56 lines times 4 puts you well over 200. If you take the numbers that I just read to you of the losses, the U.S. is operating at less than 50% of their drone capacity. And if these numbers are conservative, then it's an even worse situation. And this is, again, to reiterate, this is fighting for basically 50 days and then some sporadic fighting during the Memorandum of Understanding. This absolutely cannot be sustained. If you simply say that the war is going to continue for 60 more days, you would have emptied out the entire Reaper fleet. So this is a real issue for the United States. It's a real issue for their force posture. And it's an issue that is going to certainly mean that they lose this war with Iran, which has been known, I think, for a long time. Let's take a look at 14. The Iranian, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps showed off their underground bunker here. All of the parts that had been collected from the downed fighter jets. I mean, you can see some bombs there. They also intercepted cruise missiles. That's the decal there. You can see from the fighter jets. You can see that's a Hermes 900 by Elbit that had been shot down. You can see the sensor bulbs here for the sensor systems on these drones that take them from 30 million drones. Like the Pentagon reporters sort of settled on 30 million as the price for these MQ-9 Reaper drones. But people who have followed this show will remember back when we first started covering the destruction of them, that 30 million number was a real undersell, that the US Air Force number is closer to 50 million per drone, particularly with the sensor packages here. And some of these parts we have watched be carried. I showed you guys farmers parading them through the town after they had been shot down. There you can see that Hermes 900 there. You can see the blades in the background from the MQ-9 Reapers that have been shot down. And so this is just a collection of these parts to show on television to the Iranian people some of the losses. There you can see the canopy and the seat and the ejection seat from the F-15E that was shot down. Its 2 pilots had to be rescued. People remember that story back in April. So they have that fighter jet there. They're pointing to it here and showing you around that. And during this report, the IRGC said that more than 85% of its air defense capacity is still in place. So we can remember ridiculous comments by the Israelis and the Americans saying that they had decimated, that it was down to 10% of their air defense. Or Trump just said every day that they had knocked out their air defenses. They have no air defense, he kept saying. There you see the decal from the side of the jet there too as well. And we can look on the next slide at the close-ups here of, you can see the distinct forward-facing intake scoop from the MQ-9. There is the Hermes 900. It's not intact. They put it back together, but they've got most of that drone. And we saw these on the ground with their weapon systems as well. So reverse engineering is certainly a factor at play in some of these. Let's take a look at 16. There it is again. That's the MQ-9 propeller. That is its defeat. And the hollowing out of that weapon for the United States that can be shot down without losing pilots It's a really important part of the battle. Even though the United States and Israel claimed they had air superiority over Iran, we know that that is definitely not the case. That room you're looking at on the screen right now is a pretty good indication of that. If the videos that we show every week on here weren't enough, you can certainly see the evidence there. Also this week, the Iranians released some satellite footage. Let's look at 17 here. This is from the US's Al Zafra base in the UAE. This is a TPS-78 phased tactical phased array radar system that has been blown up. We can look at the after picture now. You can see the erasure of that. So that was an earlier attack from the earlier part of the war. All three of these were from earlier in the war, but the Iranians have this satellite imagery, and because of the censorship of the United States and its allies of their commercial satellites self-censoring, or being told to censor and adhering to it so that we don't see the damage to the bases that we saw in the first weeks of the war. But you can imagine that when we do ultimately get those bases are even in significantly worse shape than they were in the first weeks of the war. And this radar system, this is part of a war on these radar systems that Iran has carried out. And we have a verification from the early stages of the war of at least a dozen of these high profile and very expensive, some of them very expensive, the FPS 132 early warning radar that was destroyed in Kuwait. It's a $1 billion radar. There was 2 THAAD radars that were destroyed. These are $800 million radars. One was located at Muwafaq al-Salti in Jordan that we broke down on this show as well. And also at least a dozen tactical theater radars as well, which I think that one that you're seeing on the screen would qualify as one of those. So we're talking now in dozens of these having been knocked out. Let's take a look at 19 and 20. This is the battle damage from the Habshan complex. This is the United Arab Emirates gas compression unit at the Habshan refinery, its largest refinery. And you can see there that it was massive damage to the refinery. They had to shut down the refinery. The strike forced an immediate total emergency shutdown of the entire Habshan hub to depressurize the line and contain the fires, because Habshan is the heart of the UAE's domestic natural gas supply. The sudden losses of 6.1 billion standard cubic feet per day of capacity triggered immediate power grid fluctuation and energy shortages across all industries and society in the UAE. And this is the exact reason why the UAE and the Saudis and others urged Trump not to return to a war that they keep losing. Let's take a look at the next one, because we followed these as well. This is a data center in Bahrain. Data center that they say supports the United States military. They were physically crippled with cruise missile and drone strikes in July. We showed those over the last few weeks, but again, verified war damage that the United States is not showing, not admitting to, but are here seen clear as day. So that is the Iran front for now. We will obviously keep following that war, but like I said, the United States doesn't have military options right now, and I'm not expecting an immediate escalation in a war that they know they can't win. Although without massive force posture elevation in the region that we don't see happening in the near future for sure. Let's take a look at Lebanon. Hezbollah just yesterday released a set of videos. Let's start with the map here so we get situated. Yes, perfect. Thank you. This is Ali Al-Tahir Ridge at the top. We watched the battle of around Beaufort Castle and Zautar Shakia in the area of Beaufort Castle. That's right on the line of Israel's buffer zone that they had established at the ceasefire. And you can see, this is a New York Times map, that the Israelis are attempting to extend from the ceasefire line up into the Ali Al-Tahir Ridge, which is a strategic ridge line overlooking Nabatea, but also overlooking all of western Lebanon and south into Israeli territory, occupied Palestine. And it's a piece of ground that the Israelis keep threatening to take. Hezbollah, for their part, has been very, very clear that they are adhering to the ceasefire, but if there is movement on Ali al-Tahrir Ridge, that they will fight. The Israeli military is doing what it always does, using a ceasefire to achieve militarily what it failed to achieve on the battlefield. They're destroying, in the same way they did in the Gaza ceasefire, they're destroying these border villages. They're carrying out massacres. They're shelling. They're carrying out airstrikes. This is a very Israeli ceasefire. On Saturday, the IDF said that Hezbollah armed FPV drone strikes in the area seriously wounded an officer and 2 other soldiers from the 𝐓𝐡𝐞 tunnel unit. And the feeling from the Israelis is that there are Hezbollah fighters underground in the Ali al-Tahrir ridgeline in tunnels, and that is the reason why Hezbollah, one of the reasons why Hezbollah will defend this territory and has promised to defend this territory should the Israelis move forward. The attack on Saturday was the 3rd time that Hezbollah has hit the Israelis in deadly missions, in missions with casualties, not necessarily dead, in the last few weeks, last 2.5, 3 weeks. But there's been no field reports from them because they're adhering to the ceasefire for now. But like I said, 3 of those incidents. And there was another incident in Majd al-Zaanoun, which if you look over to the western coast there, it's just above that expanded no-go zone June 18th. So again, they're going beyond what this buffer zone line was supposed to be. And those troops a couple weeks ago, 2 troops were killed and 7 wounded, including 4 critically in what the IDF said was a booby-trapped IED in Majd al-Zaanoun on the western side of the country earlier this month. Again, both instances are the IDF trying to achieve through a ceasefire what they failed to achieve on the battlefield. You'll recall we covered the IDF attempt on Majd al-Zaanoun that was thwarted by the resistance with 28 operations in a 24-hour window of time. On Tuesday, Hezbollah released a video of operations from before the ceasefire around Beaufort Castle in the final days of the ceasefire. And we can take a look at that video now. These are unseen footage from before the ceasefire that Hezbollah is releasing here. And they're going to do damage to a whole string of Israeli armored vehicles. And you can see the Israeli camouflage system is working a little bit, has been upgraded a bit, but you can clearly see that's a Nour troop carrier there. Obviously, Hezbollah can clearly see that it is a Nour troop carrier and they struck it. But this is a significant upgrade from what we saw the Israelis doing early in the war, where they were just throwing fishing nets over the roofs of the entire neighborhood, and Hezbollah just flew under the fishing nets and struck. There's a D9 armored bulldozer getting destroyed. Those bulldozers cannot handle the anti-tank warhead that these drones carry. And I think probably Hezbollah released these both because they should, and we want to see all of their operations. There you see a tank and a D9 there as well, and they're going to choose the D9, which is something that we tracked all through the war. Much higher success rate destroying the D9 bulldozer than the tank, although we've seen many burning tanks, and we know of soldiers that were killed in burning tanks. So they're hitting those as well. They're going to hit this one here, the Merkava there right in front of you, trying to get it into the turret gap there. You can see right there, they're trying to put the warhead under that. We've seen that all through this. Again, this is in Zartar al-Sharqiya around Beaufort Castle. You can see on different angles the castle up on the hilltop. And that strategic ridge that you're seeing, this is another Merkava that's going to get hit from above. You can see that one. And this one is going to target the commander's hatch, also something that we have seen, a quality strike target right on the commander's hatch and the periscope that he uses for vision, that the tank commander uses for vision. You'll see it here as the drone coming in under full control and then aiming right at the commander's hatch. there's the commander's hatch. There you can see. So significant hits, and these were all part of 115 FPV drone ops, 30 of them versus tanks in the 3 weeks before the ceasefire during the Battle of Zautar Shakia. That's another D9 there that you're seeing. It's camouflaged, but obviously not camouflaged enough for to not be destroyed, because these are being destroyed for sure. There's a tank. You can see the barrel on the top of that outs that as a tank. I think this is a Humvee under another camo cover. Yeah, they got another one, another Humvee. Humvee, again, is basically 100% destruction rate with an anti-tank missile, anti-tank rocket warhead hitting that. And then here we see a burning tank. So again, battle damage assessment from a previous strike, and you're seeing soldiers running away from that. There's actually, they mark 3. There's actually 4 soldiers. You can see 2 go in each direction to try to evade. Unclear if that is just an anti-tank warhead or if there's fragmentation sleeves wrapped around those warheads, which we did see in a number of Hezbollah attacks that would disperse outwards rather than the direct dart that the anti-tank missile fires. Let's look at that one more time. I put it up one more time. Just the 24. Sorry, Tamara, that was confusing. Yeah, this is, I put this in here twice just so we can watch it again, because look at the burning at the back of the tank. So they have either exited out through their hatches at the top of the tank, or they exited through the back door as it was burning. And as they're running away, they're hit with a follow-up drone strike. And these kind of tactics are immediately going to be in play on Ali al-Tahrir Ridge if the Israelis advance. The Israelis are planning to advance, and they're planning for Hezbollah resistance on the hill. So we will follow that closely. This has been the resistance report on day 1049 of Israel's genocidal war in Gaza.
Thank you, Jon. My goodness. Just the situation in Lebanon is it's horrific. And yeah, we'll see how long that ceasefire holds. Of course, ceasefire always in scare quotes, because as you said, it's an Israeli ceasefire.
But we need a word for it, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
we do.
thing. Like you can't not call it a ceasefire. You
Right.
can call it a so-called ceasefire or something, but there's a ceasefire going on right now, and one side is honorably observing it in order to find respite for its people who have been driven from their homes, whose homes have been destroyed, and Israel just violates every single aspect of it right from the start. It's such unbelievable cowardice to continue demolishing houses when you failed at doing that during the war. And we know they failed at doing it during the war because we watched it on video. And the Israelis said, we're not bringing in these engineering vehicles anymore because they're just getting wiped out. So they wait until there's a ceasefire, and then they use that time to ethnically cleanse villages. It's exactly what we saw in Gaza. And it's just such dishonorable way. I mean, I know that's an understatement, but to handle
new word for that
like this, when you have your own soldiers who might someday fall into the hands of your enemies, as we saw very recently, the way you treat soldiers should matter in a conflict between soldiers and soldiers. It should matter, but there's just no honor for the Israelis in this.
Never has been.
And you know, you mentioned Gaza, Jon. Of course, they're still destroying buildings, expanding the so-called yellow line, and trying to achieve through the so-called ceasefire what they completely failed to achieve in 2+ years of war alongside the genocide. And now through the so-called Board of Peace and Jared Kushner, as Nora reported during the news, they're trying to get Hamas to agree to complete disarmament down to light weapons.
Right.
And their leverage is not to say, okay, we're going to come in and fight you soldier to soldier. It's that we're going to continue starving babies. We're going to continue withholding fuel. We're going to continue withholding infrastructure. We're going to force municipal services, sanitation, water to collapse. It is the most cowardly, despicable form of warfare, if you can even call that, imaginable.
Yeah.
But I think it's important not to exceptionalize it. Israel's behavior is exceptional in the world today. It is certainly one of the worst, if not the worst, perpetrator of mass atrocity crimes we can think of.
Yeah.
But its tactics are historically completely at one with how colonizers have always behaved towards natives, not through fighting their armed people or their armed men principally, but through attacking children, elderly, women, non-combatant men. The French did it, the British did it, the Germans did it, the Americans, the Belgians, all of these states that now give us these pious lectures about human rights.
I mean, you have an election being run in Israel right now that's being run on genocide. Yeah. It's a genocide election, and the parties involved are trying to stake their claim to who could be the most genocidal.
But it's always been like that. Remember back in 2019, Benny Gantz, who is still painted, he was a former Israeli Army Chief of Staff. He was the Israeli Army Chief of Staff during the 2014 war. And when he became head of the allegedly more left-wing party in Israel in 2019, his campaign slogan was that he returned Gaza to the Stone Age.
Yeah.
That was his appeal to voters. And this is what the European Union and others consider to be the left. They consider to be the peace party.
The opposition,
The opposition, the pro-peace, moderate, reasonable opposition in Israel, who run on, we proudly returned this population of refugees to the Stone Age. And of course, what they did in 2014, as horrific and vast as that was in scale, unprecedented at the time, is a fraction of what they've done since then.
Yeah, and 𝐓𝐿𝐿 𝐄𝐥𝐿 is leading the opposition slate, I guess you could say, and he's the Dahiya doctrine architect. Yeah. So you just have various styles of genocide.
It's hues. It's yeah.
And remember this discussion, because if Israel is having elections in October, and if the 𝐓𝐿𝐿 coalition wins, you're going to see all of this commentary from Western governments and Western media saying, oh, a new, moderate, pragmatic, internationally minded Israeli coalition is now in power, replacing mean old bad Netanyahu. So they're going to use, if one genocidal monster replaces another, they're going to use that to whitewash Israel and try and rehabilitate it. So from that perspective, since things are not going to change just by changing which genocidal monster is in charge, honestly, we're better off with the pariah Netanyahu there.
This is...
Well, I mean, they had, 7 elections, and he somehow manages to lose them all, but end up in government because...
Right. Fake state, fake democracy, fake elections. It's all,
Yeah, and these parties that he's bringing in to make his coalition are nuts.
Yeah, no, of course. I mean, they're just more honest. The veneer has been lifted because every single so-called Israeli politician has always been this genocidal and monstrous. They're just getting more honest about it now.
Well, what's happening in the West Bank now is being compared by Palestinians to the Nakba in 1948. Yes. Of course, what's happened in Gaza has gone beyond the Nakba in many ways. But remember, it was the Israeli left, the socialist camp, the Labour Party that did the Nakba in 1948 with the support of the British Labour Party.
That's right.
So, which was in government at the time. So historically speaking, it has been the Western so-called socialists, so-called left, that have been the biggest champions of this monstrous genocidal colonial project.
Yeah.
And now this, you know, the liberal leftish parties in the West are scapegoating Netanyahu, when as the Israeli politicians across their political spectrum, as narrative as it is, are telling us, actually our problem with Netanyahu is he's not killing and destroying enough.
Right.
Well, because the voters are the ones who carried out the genocide, right? Other than the ultra-Orthodox who just get to watch from the sidelines, everybody else participated.
And this is an important point, John, because, you know, the reason I'm insisting on this is because there is this trend now in the United States where we've seen this change in the opinion polls, where Israel is deeply unpopular across the political spectrum, of particularly the Democrats, who are slated to, you know, if they don't screw it up, which you can't put it past them, to win back control of Congress. They're doing well. You've got these more left-wing, more progressive candidates winning in primaries that, you know, in places where you never expected. And the mainstream Democrats and, you know, the party managers are trying to triangulate this by saying, oh, we're really against big bad Netanyahu. And what I'm pointing out is that Netanyahu is not the problem. Getting rid of Netanyahu changes nothing. So anyone who says the problem is Netanyahu and who refuses to say that really the problem is Israel as it's constituted as a racist Zionist colonial state, anyone who tries to deflect only to Netanyahu is not being honest about the situation and is not going to be trustworthy to push for a real change in whether it's American or British or European or whatever policies of all these states, that without which Israel could not be mass murdering people in Palestine and Lebanon.
That's right. I mean, the Democratic Party was the one in charge for the first year and a half of the genocide. Biden, AOC, Bernie Sanders.
Amnesia, though.
Completely.
You know, amnesia.
Completely.
And we even have some of these so-called progressive candidates. You know, we talked about, you know, it's a few weeks ago now. Did we talk about Abd Sayed winning in Michigan, or
no? Ronnie and I spoke about it. On
that's right.
podcast,
that's right, because I listened to that, so I thought, you know, that we did talk about it. But Abd Sayed, for example, after he won, and he is being demonized by the right, and he's being subjected to horrific Islamophobic abuse, and he has been critical of Israel. But at the same time, the moment he won that primary, he enthusiastically accepted an endorsement from Kamala Harris, who was vice president in the administration, which is primarily responsible for this genocide.
Yes.
More responsible than Israel, because Israel couldn't have done it without the airlift of Biden bombs, of baby buster bombs from the Biden-Harris administration. So what message does it send to people that you win saying, you know, I'm going to push for a different policy, I'm against the genocide, and you immediately, enthusiastically, proudly accept an endorsement from one of the
Holocaust Harris,
Holocaust Harris, as some call her, kid killer, Kamala, you know, what? So I'm just saying, I know I went off on this rant, but this is on my mind.
No, it's like it's just kind of this collective gaslighting that we're all being subjected to.
And the thing that to keep a focus on is that people are demanding change and people are voting for change. That doesn't mean they're getting it.
Right. I mean, the majority of Democratic Party voters, right? I think it's something like 80%. Want the genocide to stop and don't support US government's, you know, co-authoring of this genocide, and want the US to pull out of support for Israel entirely. All of these things that are just kind of common sense right now after 3 years of a live streamed Holocaust.
Yeah.
And yet the Democratic Party leadership,
people,
right.
Yeah, people are genuinely disgusted with
Yes.
AIPAC. They generally want to vote against candidates backed by AIPAC. They want to vote for candidates who support Palestinian rights. And the reason it's an issue is not, those who oppose Palestinian rights try to say, "Oh, why are you obsessed with this foreign policy issue?" No, it's it's primarily an American issue,
Humanity
because
issue. Yeah.
It's yes, you can say it's a moral and ethical issue for all of humanity, sure, of course, but it's an American political issue because it's an American genocide.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
tear your hair out.
The only way that this genocide could continue was with that $30+ billion infusion of weaponry to Israel.
From the Obama administration's.
From both.
Yeah, of course.
From over time, but that's on top of, that's the baseline. But to fight the war, I mean, 30 million is the sort of they haven't updated that number. We're looking for the latest numbers, because Israel just the other day proudly posted pictures from the Ministry of Defense showing D9 bulldozers being unloaded off yet another ship, a whole bunch of 𝐓�T trucks that we watched get destroyed by Hezbollah. They're all just being replaced constantly, and Israel is proud of it. And they show the photos of them all arriving to allow the genocide to continue, which would not have been possible.
That's right. Always so much to talk about. Before we go, there is one piece of breaking news that Tamara alerted us to right at the end of your report, Jon. The USS Abraham Lincoln leaves Middle East after months at sea in operation against Iran. They say that U.S. CENTCOM said the USS George Washington had arrived, quote, in the Middle East and begun operating under Central Command's control on Wednesday, and that there's about 20 warships outside of Iran's coast.
But very far outside.
Very far outside Iran's coast.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's going to be interesting to. I think that the USS George Washington is one of these old. It's very old, isn't it? Like, I mean, these ships were built decades and decades and decades ago. During the Reagan administration. He decommissioned a lot of these shipyards to maintain and update these massive vessels, which I don't know, the parts and labor and all of the infrastructure could have been used for, I don't know, healthcare and schools in this country. But they're just kind of towing back these massive ships, carriers, back to these places where they shouldn't be in the first place, of course. So I guess we'll see what happens.
They can rotate them. They can rotate them out,
Exactly.
but they can win the war with them.
No, amazing, incredible. How many years
these weapon systems were always useful and devastating against completely undefended countries and peoples. You can like the MQ-9 Reaper, that can fly around above Afghanistan, blowing up weddings and funerals all day long, and no one can shoot it down. You can park an aircraft carrier off Somalia and bomb Somalia, as the US did for many years, or Iraq, which didn't have effective air defenses and so on. But when you come up with against a country with modern air defenses and modern tactics like Israel, these weapons prove that they are obsolete. They are from literally from another century.
Yeah. Oy, all right. So much that we could talk about, but it is coming up against the clock. So let's take a look at the website. We've published just so many features in the last couple of weeks.
We were busy. We weren't. We didn't have the live stream, but we were not slacking. There was a lot of good reporting
Yeah.
Of course, we just published Abubaker Abed's latest piece on what's happening in Ireland with the Palestinian students. Very important reporting. So we're very, very proud of that. David Cronin reporting on the EU and fresh help for Israel's war industry. Our colleague Michael Brown has been following this is primary season in the United States with the November general election coming up for Congress and the Senate. So Michael Brown has been keeping his eye on that. I published a report on a lawsuit that the Trump administration filed against the federal government that was thrown out. But what was extraordinary about this lawsuit was how the Trump administration tried to paint ordinary, lawful protests against the genocide as if it was literally a campaign of terrorism targeting Jewish students on campuses. And I'm working on another story that's connected to this that we'll publish soon. Asa published a story, the Israel lobby, the Anti-Defamation League in particular, is coming after the novelist and author Susan Abu Hawa. They're trying to get her publisher to cancel a forthcoming book, Typical Israel Lobby Tactics. And Asa spoke to Susan Abu Hawa, and this article is really important. There's a lot more. I haven't read this one yet. I think it was just published yesterday. I haven't caught up with it yet, by Omar Zaza, the Michigan 8 case. This is, of course, the U.S. government is going after activists in Michigan, again, trying to paint them as somehow linked to terrorism. This is part of the broader crackdown on Palestine solidarity. So this is a very important case, and I'm sure Omar has some very important reporting and insights, as well as other features from Gaza. And Nora, remind people about your conversation with Roqayah Chamseddine, which we also published while we were on hiatus from the live stream.
Yeah, it was a great, very concise 30-minute conversation that Rania and I had. It's up on our YouTube, Resisting Trump's Escalating Attack on Independent Media. Rania, of course, is the host of a couple shows on Breakthrough News, and they were subpoenaed by the U.S. Congress's House Ways and Means Committee, which is led by like a far right extremist Zionist, Israel file in Congress, subpoenaing Breakthrough News and a couple of affiliated nonprofit organizations that support it, demanding their financial records and internal communications, all of these absurd things, and trying to link it to what the U.S. government and the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, has determined that, it's all a Cuban-led plot to sow destruction against what he calls American civilization. So it's a really important conversation. It sounds so absurd, all of this, because it is, but as Rania points out, it's actually also really dangerous and portends, more repression, especially against independent media outlets. So, of course, that's very near and dear to our heart. It's a great conversation. So
great. It really is good. It is really, Rania's always great. And, solidarity with her and her colleagues who are under this attack. It's part of the overall crackdown. And we all have to stand together against it. And one more thing, since we were last on air, we also published the monthly Palestine in Pictures feature, not to be missed. Incredible photography from primarily Palestinian photojournalists, primarily in Gaza, but from across Palestine, along with a really great roundup of significant events over the previous month, compiled by our colleague Maureen Claire Murphy. So really powerful stuff to share and to bear witness to what's happening. So that too.
Absolutely. And of course, for everything, you can go to electronicintifada.net. Ali, who do we have to thank this week?
Well, of course, as we never tire of saying, we cannot do this work without you. And we are so grateful to those who who make our work possible through all the ways you support us, and that includes financially by donating to fund everything we do. So I want to thank a few people who've made donations recently: Tariq, Elizabeth, Larry, Mohammed, Odette, Patricia, David, Jürgen, Selim, and Inger. And I also want to thank a group of comrades, a group of activists in Germany who came together, and they donated almost $2,000 to the Electronic Intifada, saying specifically that they wanted to support our colleagues in Gaza, media workers in Gaza. And so that will be part of our ongoing support for our colleagues in Gaza. We're very grateful for that collective effort and that collective solidarity with our colleagues in Gaza, who really do count on the support of all of us, and we will continue to do that. And a couple of people even made donations while we've been live on air. They include Barbara and Holly. Thank you so much. Thank you also, Tracy, and to everyone else, especially those who give a monthly donation. So if you want to give a one-time or a monthly gift and keep us going, keep us strong, go to electronicintifada.net, click donate now, or there are links in the description if you're watching on YouTube. Thank you again to everyone, each and every person, for all your chats, comments, emails, all your love. We are we're here for it.
Yeah, we can't get enough. Thank you. And I want to thank, of course, Tamara Nassar, our director and producer. Thank you so much, Tamara, for all that you do. And thank you to Ellie Gerzon for social media production. Thanks to Pierre Loisel for radio production. Thank you to all of our colleagues at the Electronic Intifada, all of our contributors, and on behalf of myself, Ali, Jon, and Tamara, thank you all, and we will see you next week. Thanks.